Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Mito Uzumaki give her inheritance to Naruto. Before I start, please support for more amazing content, and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by StealthMaster, and link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. Chapter 1, A Rude Reunion. A figure sighed as he looked at the scroll that had arrived at noon. It contained details of the Fourth Shinobi War that had occurred in the elemental nations. But surprisingly it wasn't hidden villages against each other. In fact it was all 5 great hidden villages, as well as all the other smaller hidden villages against Akatsuki, and the Hidden Sound village. Turns out both Madara Uchiha and Orochimaru bolstered their forces with missing nins and thugs to rival the other hidden villages in terms of manpower, and it seemed that they were winning especially since they were using the Biju that they extracted out of their Jinchuriki. So far they had the Ichibi, Sanbai, Yambi, Gobi, Rokubi and the Hachibi, but they didn't have the Nibi, Nanabi or the Kyubi. Nibi's Jinchuriki was cornered by Akatsuki, but then a stranger came and literally obliterated the Akatsuki members Haiden and Kakazu. Following that the Jinchuriki just disappeared of the face of the elemental nations. The Nanabi's Jinchuriki was a different story. She was being hunted by her own villagers who wanted to beat her for being a Jinchuriki, but after she had rounded into an alleyway she found a dead end. When they were about to attack her though they were slaughtered and the Jinchuriki was gone. Finally the Kyubi's Jinchuriki simply vanished after he had been exiled. Many people had looked for him, but they had no luck in finding him. That was 10 years ago, Naruto thought as he sighed again as he contemplated on what to do. So far the scroll had stated that they would like an alliance to combat the Akatsuki and Orochimaru. However, in order to make it more persuasive they even added in how likely they were to attack his own nation once the elemental nations were overrun. Now after that subtle message Naruto had half a mind to refuse the alliance. After all, his nation was so far away that by the time they arrived, they would be tired and not effective in combat. That, and the barrier that shuts down the chakra in a person's body would render them useless in battle. You see, the world was split into 2 continents, the East and the West. The East became known as the Elemental Nations and the West recently became known as the United Whirlpool Nation. The reason for the division was because during the fight between the Rikudo Sennin and the Jubi unleashed a strange attack that made all the inhabitants in the West lose their chakra and their chakra network. After the battle people who could use chakra started seeing those who couldn't as inferior, and eventually prejudice started to grow. Only the Shodame Hokage, the Senju clan and the Uzumaki clan saw them as regular people. But eventually it wasn't enough to stop the hatred, so they asked the Shodame to split the land in half and send them far away. After some tough resistance from the Shodame he eventually agreed. Then using his control over wood the Shodame split the land in half. His brother Tobirama Senju then used his control over water to push the west far away so that it would be extremely difficult to cross between the two, bordering impossible. In the end it made both of them very tired and had to spend a little while in a hospital to recover from the effort. Back to the present, when Naruto arrived and united the West he decided to make it better if not through chakra then technology. The result was absolutely stunning. Buildings made of bricks and metal instead of wood, weapons that made the Yondaime Hokage's Hiraishin look primitive, a navy that dwarfs the wooden boats the East use. Medical facilities were more efficient than even Tsunade. Communications that made the East shortwave radios became toys that were beaten by kids' walkie-talkies, and overall, everyone was happy. And, imagine the continent with cities along the edge that faces the east with the suburbs just behind them and the countryside behind them. There was no crime or corruption, all of it wiped out before it could fester and grow. People were supportive of just about everything he did. His title as leader of the United Whirlpool Nation was sort of passed down through the family. But if they were seen as not worthy then another would be chosen. Once chosen though they would permanently stay in as leader and no one can remove them and all the decisions are final. Nobody else could defy them. Looking through the pros and cons of the proposition he saw a chance at gaining something from this. Then he placed the scroll down onto his desk made of oak and glanced around his office. It was painted white and had a kind of government feel to it. At one end of the room was his desk and large leather chair. Large windows behind him showed the view of his nation that he ruled and also a flag of his nation, which was white with the Uzumaki clan symbol in the center. In front of him were 2 leather couches that were perpendicular to his desk with a small table between them. On the other end of the room was the only door that the room had. Looking back on his life he absently thought back to the day he was exiled after he had successfully completed his mission to bring back his old teammate, Sasuke Uchiha. Flashback. Naruto sat in a chair in the middle of Konoha's council room. After being healed of his wounds he was curious as to why he was here. He had already filed his report away, so why be summoned here and specifically only him? Wouldn't Shikamaru be a better choice because of his status as the leader at the time? Looking around he noticed the civilian council were looking smug, whilst the shinobi council and the Hokage were looking sad. Okay, not a good sign, he thought. Whatever was going on it wouldn't end well for him, that was a definite. An elderly man wrapped in bandages, Danzo Shimura his name was, then stood up and addressed the Uzumaki. Naruto Uzumaki. Due to inflicting a nearly fatal injury to your target Sasuke Uchiha we have decided that you be banished, and that all that connects you to Konoha stripped from you. In addition to this, your ability to form hand seals will be taken away from you, as well as all of your possessions and finance will be confiscated and given to Sasuke. Uchiha, as compensation, he stated smugly, as Naruto was given chakra-absorbing handcuffs and then dragged out of the room before he could even comprehend or object to what had happened. Time skip. Next day. It was the evening for when his banishment was scheduled, and during that time he had time to think about what had happened to him. He had completed his mission and had almost gotten killed by someone he thought was his brother in bond. Turns out that it had all been a ploy so that he could gain the Mangekyo Sharingan, and that he never really thought as Naruto as a brother, only as a tool to further his ambition to kill his brother. It was then that he also realized that his so-called crush Sakura Haruno had only used his feelings for her in order to get what she wanted, even if it meant him sacrificing himself. Safe to say his crush for the pink-haired banshee stopped there, and had no intention of returning. Soon though he received numerous visits from certain people. Almost the entire Konoha 12, now 11, came down and berated him for being a dope. Sasuke even punched him in the chest for good measure. Sakura punched him in the head and called him a failure. Both Hinata and Niji gave him some juken blows that were painful but not lethal. Ino kicked him when he was on the floor. Kiba had Akamaru urinate on him, and Tenten cut him with some of her kunai. The only ones of the Konoha 11 to not turn up were Chuji, Shikamaru, Lee and Shino. Chuji was too kind to blame him for anything. Shikamaru was too smart to be bought into it. Lee just didn't like hitting people who couldn't fight back, especially when said person was a dope like him. And Shino was also too smart to be brought into it. By the end, Naruto was still very much alive but in pain and smelling like urine. His suffering hadn't finished there though, as his sensei, Kakashi Hatake, came down and scolded him for hurting his teammate. He didn't even care to notice the state of his student before he declared that he was no longer a student of his, that if he ever said he was a student of his then he would deny it, and walked away from the broken boy before he could even say a thing. After a couple of hours it was time for his banishment, and he was roughly grabbed and dragged through the village. Along the way he was greeted with jeers and insults from villagers, shinobi and his peers. Then one of the villagers became more bold by throwing a tomato at his head, and then more joined in. When they reached the gates he was covered in all kinds of rotten food. They then had Danzo apply the seal to his arms to prevent him from forming the hand seals for jutsu, and just before he left he glanced back to notice the seldom looks from Tsunade, Shizen, Irika, Shino, Shikamaru, Chuji, Lee Asuma, Gai, Kurinai, Anko Mitarashi, Konohamaru, Odin, Moegi, Tochi and Ayam. From that alone he knew who were friend and who were foe. He then ran as fast as he could away from the village with many people cheering as his form disappeared from sight, down the paved road. End flashback. Half a year later he had been reverse summoned by the Toad Elders Fukasaku and Shima to ask him why he hadn't summoned any of them in such a long time. After he explained to them about his banishment, resulting with some very angry Toad Elders, he asked them to cancel his contract with them so that he couldn't be found by Konoha easily if they wanted to hunt him down for any non-reasonable excuses. They had been sad to realize the logic but accepted it even though they asked if he could meet the Great Toad Sage as a goodbye. The Great Toad Sage sighed when he was told about the cancellation, though he did say that he somewhat predicted it would happen. His vision had said that something would happen to one of their summoners that would affect them greatly, and told him about the child of the prophecy. He even let a small tear out but accepted it as well, though he said that as a parting gift they would teach him senjutsu to combat his lack of hand seals. At the end of the training he had mastered senjutsu and learned sealing as well. He had tried using his knowledge to remove the seal that prevented his use of hand seals but discovered something horrible. The seal used hadn't been the standard one used on people who were banished. Instead this one destroyed his ability to use hand seals completely, so that meant he could forever no longer use hand seals and would have to rely on other ways to compensate for it. Namely weapons, fuinjutsu and taijutsu. Before he set off again the Toads gave him the key to his seal that held the Kyuubi, telling him that it was his since it wouldn't be safe with them as Jiraiya could take it with him at any time and that he could use it to reverse summon him as well if he couldn't do it via Toads. And, remember, Jiraiya was not mentioned in the flashback, meaning nobody knows his reaction to Naruto's banishment yet. Soon after that he saved Yujito ni, Nibi's container, and Fu, Nanabai's container, from both the Akatsuki and her own village respectively. They then traveled together, and became very close. 5 years after his banishment they became a couple, with Yujito and Fu becoming Naruto's girlfriends. Another year later they married and decided to go to the west to get away from the hidden villages and the Akatsuki. On their arrival the place was just as conflicted as the east, but this changed as they traveled across it, helping people along the way. Eventually they united the continent, and the united Whirlpool nation was born. Naruto gained the title Uzumaki, and his two second-in-commands were his wives Yujito and Fu, who became well favored by everyone. The three also became the only chakra users that the West respected. Now with this alliance I could demand for my clan's heritage back that was stolen by the Fire Daimyo, Naruto thought with a scowl in place. Now some would think he was talking about Minato Namikaze, his father, but he was actually talking about his mother, Kushina Uzumaki. You see, when Uzushiyobikyo was destroyed by a combined effort of IWA and Kumo, the Land of Fire's daimyo came in and claimed the land as his own without any consent from the survivors and threatened all of them with his large army of samurais that forced the survivors to flee. The reason his mother went to Konoha was because she thought she could get help from the Sandang to stop the daimyo. Her plea was left unanswered as the Sandaime didn't want to risk a civil war that could be taken advantage of by the other nations, but stayed in Konoha as a necessity. Then, due to her being the only Uzumaki in Konoha other than Mito Uzumaki, she had to become the second Jinchuriki to the Kyubi no Kitsune. Later on she fell in love with Minato, when he saved her from Kumo Nin, who wanted her for her special chakra that could subdue a Biju, and soon fell pregnant with Naruto. Then on the day of his birth the Kyubi was ripped out of Kushina by Madara Uchiha, and his father was forced to seal it inside of him when it was obvious the Kyubi wouldn't stop rampaging even after the genjutsu on it had been released. Naruto wanted to take back what was his, especially since it was taken by someone who had no rights to it in the first place, but he wanted to do it without putting his nation at risk. The country had only been around for 4 years and some were still affected by the violence that existed before them. He didn't want to cause harm to his country because of him being selfish, no matter how many times he could be. On to why he didn't want his father's inheritance was because there was no longer any to be claimed. Reason being, his father had placed a blood and time seal on the inheritance that prevented people from touching it without Naruto's blood, and if it wasn't done by the time he was 18 then the seal would destroy his inheritance to prevent anyone else from getting their hands on his jutsu. The reason why he knew about his parents without being told by anyone who knew at the time was because his own parents had told him when he tried to control the Kyubi. They told him everything from his inheritance to the events that led to the Kyubi's attack. At first he was angry at his father for the problems the Kyubi gave him and even said that he wouldn't take the Namake's name, but he did understand why he did it, and would say he was his son. The only problem was that he would be taking on his Uzumaki side of the family, as he had been brought up on the name Uzumaki, and that the Namake's inheritance had been destroyed by the time blood seal on it too soon for him to do anything about it. His father had been sad that he couldn't pass on his Hiraishin jutsu to him, but admitted it was for the best because it wouldn't do good if someone like Sasuke Uchiha got his hands on it. His mother though was ecstatic that her son would be following in her footsteps by specializing in weapons and Fuinjutsu. She also told him that if he wanted to learn how to use her chakra chains then he would need to find the ruins of Yuzushiogakure and locate the scrolls she hid that also contained her other techniques. After defeating the Kyubi and gaining full control over his chakra he said goodbye to his parents, which included being hugged by both of his parents, and they left him with tears in his eyes when they told him that they were proud of him and that they would always love him, no matter what. They then disappeared and it was then that he started creating a friendship with Kyubi, who he discovered was called Kurama, and made his conditions more hospitable in the seal. Sighing again he pressed the intercom to his wives and said, "Yujito-chan, Fu-chan, can you come here please?" "Sure, Naruto-kun." 10 minutes later his door opened and in stepped his 2 wives. Yujito wore dark blue jeans with a picture of a pink cat paw at the bottom of her right leg, white trainers, a white t-shirt that covered her C-cup breasts, and had styled her hair in a bandaged tail that went down to the small of her back. Also on her were various exercise equipment for monitoring oneself, i.e. heart rate monitor and a watch. Following her was Fu, who wore similar to Yujito except it had a butterfly on her jeans, and she wore a red t-shirt that covered her C-cup breasts. Other than that though they wore exactly the same. And, I am not going to talk about facial features. If you don't know, look it up. What did you want to talk about, Naruto-kun? Yujito asked as they both sweated slightly, throwing the scroll to them, to which Fu caught they opened it to read the contents. A series of emotions played across their faces, most notably confusion, coldness, then finally anger. Throwing the scroll back to him, Fu told him what they felt about the alliance. How dare they try to involve us into their war, and instead of making us worried they should have just come clean and say that they need our help badly, Fu stated loudly. Yeah, after everything that they have done to innocent people they dare say that they are justifiable? Especially to Jinchuriki. They treated us like vermin. In fact, only Killer Bee got any kind of recognition, and that only happened when he was in his late 30s. Kumo was under attack and he almost died in the process, Yujito added. Running a hand through his still spiky blonde hair he replied with a sigh. Yeah, I know, but there are still people who are being harmed because of Madara and Orochimaru, and to be honest I would rather choose the lesser of the 2 evils here. The hidden villages may have hurt innocent lives as well, but most of that I know was done unintentional. The only time that didn't happen was with us containers specifically, and not everyone in general. Both Yujito and Fu's expression softened at that. Despite the harm done to him by Konoha, he was still willing to ally with them if it meant the safety of innocent people. It was one of those qualities that made people open up to him, or try to befriend him. What Konoha had done was throw away a diamond in the rough, and in the end what was Konoha's loss became the West's gain. Thinking over it a little more they looked at each other for a moment before nodding back to him, to which he pressed a different button on the intercom that connected him to the communications department. Fuki-san, can you please send a message to Konoha to tell them that I will meet them and the other Kages about an alliance at the Naha port, and that is an actual in Japan. If you were wondering, in Kirigakure 2 days from now. Also inform them the reason why the Naha port was chosen was because of the amount of space needed for our arrival, Naruto said as he took his finger off the button. A second later he heard a female's voice reply back. Yes, Uzukage-sama. Right away the intercom then went silent. After that was over he walked over towards his wives and gave them both a kiss on the lips before flashing to their shared room in the Uzukage's mansion. For that night the mansion of the Uzukage was loud with moans and sounds of flesh smacking flesh. One day later in Konoha, Tsunade sat behind her desk in the Hokage Tower in worry as she held the letter that had arrived from the UWN, shortened version of United Whirlpool Nation, that morning. Standing in the room with her were the other 4 Kages. Mei Terumi the Mizukage. Anoki the Tsuchikage. Gaara no Sabaku the Kazekage. Finally there was the Reikage. Standing with them also was Mifune the samurai leader of the Land of Iron and representative of the smaller hidden villages that couldn't have a Kage. Looking at the letter in front of them on the desk they studied it, and if they were honest it looked weird to them. Instead of a sealed scroll they got a light brown, rectangular envelope that was sealed on the back. The address read, Tsunade Senju, Hokage, Hokage Tower, Konoha, Elemental Nations. Then in the top right-hand corner was a blue stamp with a white swirl in the center. Looking to her fellow Kages in confusion she asked them what was on their mind. Well, it seems that they have started using alternate means of communication, but let's see what they sent back, Mei offered, receiving numerous nods the room's other occupants. Turning over the letter and breaking the seal, Tsunade took out the reply and read it aloud for everyone to hear it. Dear leaders of the Elemental Nations, I have recently received your letter containing the want for an alliance, and I must say it was a shock to say the least. I have given it consideration and have decided that an alliance may be possible if we talked face to face, so I will meet all of you at the Naha port in Kirigakure tomorrow in the evening. The reason for this is because of the space needed for our arrival. Also I will be bringing some guards with me for protection, so feel free to bring some along as well. On a more serious note, please do not send any ninja through unauthorized or it will be taken as an act of aggression on your side and an alliance will be impossible. Yours sincerely, N.U. Uzumakis of the United Whirlpool Nation. Just below that was another swirl, only red instead of white. I have seen that swirl before, Inoki muttered as he saw a look of recognition appear on the faces of the Reikage and Hokage as well, though the reason was different. That's the symbol of Konoha. Who does he think he is using our symbol? When he comes here I should demand he remove it, and pay compensation to us for forgery, Tsunade ranted until she was interrupted by a cough from the Reikage and the Tsuchikage. Actually Tsunade Dano, it is the other way round, they said as he saw Tsunade raise an eyebrow in confusion. Seeing A's reluctance to continue because of his predecessor's mistakes, Anoki decided to pick up from there. You see Tsunade Dano, that symbol originally came from the Uzumaki clan in Yuzushiogakure. Due to their close connection with the Senju clan, the Uzumaki clan gave permission to Konoha to use their symbol as a sign of friendship. The symbol is now shown on the leaf headbands and on the back of the Chunin and Jonin flak vests. Also the last initial of his name is U, this could mean Uzumaki. So whoever this NU is, they could very well have all rights to the symbol, even retire it if they want to. The reason why Reikage Dano here is reluctant to continue is because during the Third Shinobi War Kumo tried to kidnap an Uzumaki but was foiled by the Yondaime Hokage, who was a Chunin, and, was he a Chunin at the time? At the time Inoki finished as he saw the embarrassed blush that the Hokage was now adorning. It shouldn't have been news to her, especially since she was the Hokage and a Senju to boot. It was then that Tsunade realized how important the Uzumaki were to Konoha's founding. Without them the Senju and Uchiha would have never found a neutral country to negotiate in, and would have kept on fighting. How when Madara first used the Kyubi to attack Konoha, Mito Uzumaki, her own grandmother, sealed it within herself to protect them. Then the abuse that one Naruto Uzumaki suffered at the hands of a village that prides itself on his symbol. Finally the fact that the academy didn't teach anything about the Uzumaki clan was the salt added to the injury. Konoha had taken everything that belonged to the Uzumaki clan, yet gave nothing in return, claimed what was the Uzumakis as their own and abused the last of its members. It was one of the most awful betrayals that could be committed in the Elemental Nations. How is he supposed to get there the next day? It took 3 days for the scroll to reach him. How is he going to cross the sea that splits the east and west apart? It's nearly impossible for us to cross it, Mei stated, wanting to get back to the topic at hand. Shaking her head to clear her thoughts, she made a mental note to right the wrongs Konoha has made. Starting with the Uzumaki clan. I don't know, maybe they'll surprise us again. For now though I think it best that we retire for the day and we all should meet at the Naha port tomorrow evening as it said in the reply, Mifune said as he bowed in respect and left along with the other Kages. After bidding the other leaders goodbye she looked at current Jonins to decide who were best to bring along. Ichiraku Ramen Stand. The stand was unusually quiet as the customers ate their food in silence. Before Naruto's banishment this place used to be filled with laughter from friends and family. After his banishment it became as quiet as a ghost town. When they got the news, Tucci threw out anybody who insulted his favorite customer, and his daughter Ayam had locked herself in her room and didn't come out for a whole day. Apparently she had had a small crush on the blonde but didn't do anything because of his crush on Sakura at the time. Afterwards she was cold to all of the Konoha 11 who bad-mouthed, or had a hand in Naruto's suffering. Inside the bar, sitting on the bar stools to the ramen stand, were Hinata and Niji Hyuga, Kiba Inuzuka and his partner Akamaru, Ino Yamanaka and Tenten. All of them had depressed auras about them as they constantly reminded themselves of the pain they had caused to Naruto just before he was banished, since today would be the 10-year anniversary that it occurred. I still can't forgive myself for abusing him like that. I mean, we all thought that Naruto had almost killed the team when we caught word of how badly wounded he was. Not once did we think that Naruto himself would be wounded, Kiba said, with Akamaru whining in agreement. I know. And then when Tsunade called us to ask us about his condition before leaving, sob, we told her, and then said we were glad we did it, sob, Hinata sobbed as she couldn't get rid of the look of betrayal from the blonde when she and the others had delivered their punishment. Niji rubbed the back of his cousin as she sobbed with her back hunched. Truth be told, if anyone suffered the most out of them, it was Hinata. The girl had a huge crush on Naruto since the academy, and didn't have the courage to ask him out. Now she most likely never will have a chance with him, since despite Naruto giving her confidence at the Chunin exams she didn't return it. Instead she, along with himself, used a painful but non-lethal Juken strike to slowly torture him along with the others. In fact, when Ayame and Chuji heard about their involvement, they banned them along with Sakura and Sasuke from stepping foot in the stand. Out of the whole Konoha 11 at the time, only Shikamaru, Shino, Chuji and Lee were still allowed to eat there. Eventually, after many apologies and begging, Hinata, Niji, Kiba, Ino and Tenten were allowed back into the stand but were now treated with indifference until Naruto said otherwise. That in itself was unlikely to happen since he wasn't allowed in the village anymore. Thinking about Naruto made them recollect the meeting they had with Tsunade just after Naruto's banishment. Flashback. After Naruto had been forced to leave, Tsunade called all of the Rookie 9 and Team Guy and their sensei to appear in her office to discuss the Sasuke retrieval mission, which brings us to the now filled-up Hokage's office. Tsunade herself sat behind her desk, with her elbows leaning on the desk, her fingers interlocked. That consequently hid her mouth slightly and had a serious look about her. In front of her stood the, now, Konoha 11 with their sensei behind them respectively. On her far left were Team Guy, Team 8 on her close left, Team 7 on her close right and Team 10 on her far right. Looking at each team briefly, she decided it was time to begin the meeting. Okay, as you all know, just minutes ago Naruto Uzumaki was banished for hurting Sasuke Uchiha on the retrieval mission that finished recently. Now before Naruto was put in a holding cell he was perfectly healthy and fit. Now the thing was, when he was being escorted to the gates I noticed several things. Firstly, he had his tenketsu in his stomach closed off, that can very painful. Secondly, he had bruising around his chest area from a punch or kick, as well as similar bruising to his head. Thirdly, he had multiple scars on his arms from what looked like kunai wounds. Lastly, he smelled of dog urine when he walked by me. Now can anyone here tell me why he was in that condition when you were the last ones to see him in his cell? She questioned them in a tone that said she knew who did it, and just wanted them to deny it. Sasuke snorted by saying, "Yeah, we did it. I punched him in chest, Sakura the head and Ino kicked him when he fell to the ground. Hinata and Niji closed his tenketsu and Tenten cut him up with her kunai. What does it matter though? After all, he did deserve it for almost killing me." This shocked Tsunade, even more so when said shinobi nodded their heads in agreement. Raising her eyebrows, she decided to get more information. And didn't they stop to think that Naruto had been hurt as well? She questioned as the previously mentioned people looked confused at what she meant. However, this time it was Shikamaru who answered. "Hokage-sama. I thought there was more to it along with Chuji, Shino and Lee. So we went to Shizen to ask about his injuries. Naruto was already in a prison cell at the time. After we found out about his injuries we ran as fast as we could to stop the others, but it was too late as they had already tortured and visiting hours had ended with them." Shikamaru finished explaining as those who didn't know about Naruto's condition widened their eyes at the revelation. All but one, that is. "Oh please, what could the dobe have had suffered at my hands when he showed a Rasengan into my chest that burned away my skin?" Sasuke stated with a snobbish tone. "How about a punctured lung from a Chidori?" Tsunade countered as everyone's, except for those who already knew and Sasuke and Sakura, eyes widened in horror at the realization at what they had done to the blonde ex-shinobi. They had jumped to conclusions without getting the full story from both sides. Kakashi felt like he was just as bad as the villagers who had abused Naruto because of the Kyuubi. It was worse because it had been his jutsu that Sasuke had used to force Naruto to use the Rasengan, and then he had the audacity to scold Naruto that badly. I mean, he thought he told Sasuke to not use that jutsu on comrades. But it seemed that he didn't listen and Naruto paid the price for it, in more ways than one. "Minato-sensei, Kushin and Ichin. I'm a horrible person. I took everything you taught me and threw it out the window. Same with Obito. He said that comrades who abandon others are worse than trash, and I did exactly that with Naruto. I failed you all." Kakashi inwardly sobbed. On the outside only a lone tear fell out of his exposed eye as well as his body started shaking slightly. Quickly, before anyone could talk to him, he shunshined to his apartment where he proceeded to cry himself to unconsciousness. When Kakashi shunshined, everyone, minus Tsunade and surprisingly the remaining Jonin sensei, wondered why the copycat Nin disappeared. Tsunade looked towards the Jonin sensei and noticed that they too had come to the same conclusion that Kakashi must have done something to Naruto as well, the genin, but not physical. Once a moment had passed, the genin remembered how each one of them slowly tormented the blonde and the look of betrayal and extreme sadness in his eyes as they stabbed a piece of his soul with every second of their punishment. Tenten, Ino and Hinata dropped to the floor sobbing and crying at the pain they caused unnecessarily to one of their friends that could very well have totally ended their ties with him. Niji, Kiba and Akamaru bowed their heads in shame as they felt the glaring gazes of their sensei on their backs. Shikamaru, Chuji, Shino and Lee just looked at their comrades get swallowed up by their shame. To be honest, they didn't want them to suffer, but they needed to learn the lessons of think before acting and that actions have consequences. They were disgusted though when Sasuke smirked in his usual arrogant way. So I did more damage because my jutsu was stronger. HN shows the dobe was nothing more than that dash. That's where you're wrong, Uchiha Tsunade said, cutting off the raven-haired nin. Seeing this caused the Uchiha to a confused and angry expression that made Tsunade give a small grin in triumph. You see, Uchiha, at one point in the past Jiraiya told me of when he and Kakashi did the same thing. The outcome was that Kakashi had the same wound as you, and Jiraiya told me that he had to hold back or it would have killed Kakashi. Therefore Naruto held back in order to not kill you so that he could bring you back alive. Tsunade finished as both Sasuke and Sakura scowled at the news. Sakura was about to yell something but was stopped by the glare and killing intent, Ki, being directed at her from the busted blonde Kage. Okay, now that has been taken care of, I must issue punishments to some of you because of your reckless and violent actions. Naruto was inside a prison cell, and unless being interrogated, all prisoners must not be subject to verbal or physical pain. You all did both, therefore your punishment will be no new training from anybody, clans and family included. You may though train in what you already know. Next you will only take D-ranked missions for the next 6 months and will not be allowed to take part in the Chunin exams that also will take place in 6 months. This will apply to Sasuke Uchiha, Sakura Haruno, Hinata Hyuga, Kiba Inuzuka along with Akamaru, Niji Hyuga and Tenten. Kakashi Hatake will be given his punishment next time I summon him. In the meantime, Shino Abirame, Chuji Akimichi and Rock Lee will form a temporary team to enter the Chunin exams if their sensei are willing to agree at the time. Dismissed, Tsunade informed everyone in an official tone as the Jonins vanished via Shunshin and the Genin, and the newly promoted Chunin walked out the door. End flashback. The next day they had heard that the elders of the council had barged into the Hokage's office and demanded that the Uchiha be pardoned of his punishment. The Hokage's response was to be thrown out of her office by herself, and told in a cold tone to not just barge into her office like they owned the place. She also added that she would not lift the Uchiha's punishment no matter what they said or did. From there on they had started to see how pampered and arrogant the Uchiha was. Later on they heard that Kakashi had been punished by being forbidden from reading his Ika series for 6 months, and he would be given many other punishments if he was even late by 1 minute to any meeting for the same period of time. Many of the Konoha 11 thought it was unfair, but they discovered that Kakashi had only verbally abused Naruto, not physically, and so couldn't be punished as severely as them. What really was eventful was when we found out about the Kyuubi and his heritage when Jiraiya-sama stormed into Tsunade-sama's office when he heard the news of Naruto. Banishment, Niji added as he remembered how pissed the Sannin was when he arrived. It had been 1 year since Naruto's banishment, and the Konoha 11 and the Konohamaru Corps had just finished a joint D-rank mission when the man all but blasted the doors off their hinges and then proceeded to shout out why Naruto's name had been erased from the Toad contract, and how could she had let Naruto's banishment happen. She replied that she couldn't control the decision made when even the Hyuga clan supported the motion. Jiraiya had then yelled out how Naruto was now a target for Akatsuki. In his haste he had forgotten that the Konoha 11 had been present, and after being pressured by them, they eventually broke and told them about the Kyuubi being sealed inside of him since birth. All of the Konoha 11, minus Sasuke and Sakura, and the Konohamaru Corps were shocked at the news and soon had a newfound respect for Naruto when they remembered how badly his mission records were. Soon though it dawned on them that some of them were just as bad as the villagers since they did exactly the same thing to him when he was being held in a prison cell. Sasuke and Sakura though had believed that he was the Kyuubi itself and continued to badmouth him. Soon Sakura made a comment about how his parents were likely a drunk and a prostitute. She had then been violently slammed against the wall by an angry toad sage who yelled out his parents were great ninja. This had raised questions from everyone, except Tsunade, about how he knew Naruto's parents, when nobody else did. He then couldn't avoid it, and told them that his parents were the Yondaime Hokage and the Chishio no Habanero. The reactions were mixed. Sakura and Sasuke denied it, saying that they were geniuses and he was a dope. The others though saw the connections that made him reflect the two people. He had the same blue eyes and spiky hair of the Yondaime, but had the facial structure and personality of the Chishio no Habanero. Plus the fact it was known that Kushina was Minato's wife and that her name was Uzumaki. It made all of them even more ashamed of themselves. The Genins and Kakashi because they realized how they had just spat on their heroes' legacies. The Kunoichi all looked up to Kushina and the shinobi had all adored the Yondaime. Tenten had then asked why he had failed 3 times, to which Tsunade responded that the first 2 times he was sabotaged to fail and that the Sandaime hadn't picked up on. His actual results would have been about average had they not been tempered with, and because he would achieve sometimes in school parents would arrange mobs to beat the boy whenever he did something well. This had then given him the impression that succeeding was bad behavior, so when it came down to their generation it was already too late. He had completely foregone training and nothing Irika did encouraged him to try working hard again. This made many of the Jonin sensei despise themselves as they had assumed that Naruto was a clown that did what he did because he could, not because he needed to do it for his survival or that he was conditioned to be like that, especially when they heard how he passed and became a genin. Then when the other nations heard about Naruto's banishment they started cutting off ties with us. First was wave, then snow, then tea, and we almost lost sand as well if it wasn't for Gaara saying that Naruto wouldn't want him to abandon the few people who were nice to him. Though our alliance is greatly strained and even though they will still help us in a war they will not aid us in any way in peacetime, Ino said as they briefly remembered how furious Gaara had been when he got the news of Naruto's banishment. His sand had nearly on instinct killed the council if it wasn't for his sister, who calmed him down. Gaara then proposed that when Naruto met him again he would allow Temari to marry him since apparently she had had a small crush on the boy as well when the Chunin exams finished. He then also stated how if he was to meet Naruto again then it would be his choice on if he should stay with Konoha or not. It had caused an uproar with the civilian council, but after a burst of Ki from the Hokage they promptly shut up. Then when the Yandame's possessions destroyed themselves and Naruto's heritage was fully revealed, the council tried to bring him back. But because he cut off his ties to the toads we can't find him. Not that I blame him, Ino continued until the rest of them had finished eating. Yeah, well, now you know to get the whole story. Instead of doing something based on only one side and not looking further into it, Tucci stated passively as he took their now empty bowls of ramen and gave them the bill for the food. Sighing the Chunins and Jonin, Niji is the only Jonin along with Shino, Shikamaru, Temari and Kankuro, paid for their meals and left the stand with gloom looks. As they pushed the curtains aside to walk out into the street they saw a thoughtful Kakashi walking past them and surprisingly without his erotic novels that Jiraiya wrote. The man himself had his head tilted to look at the floor holding his chin in his left hand and his other hand in his pocket as he walked through the crowd. Kakashi-sensei, what is it that has caused you to be seen without your porn? They not have your favorite Aika? Kiba joked in the hopes of lifting everyone's spirits up and get back to the present instead of dwindling on the past. Said Jonin looked at them and his exposed eye closed in what people could only interpret a smile. Hi there Kiba, and no, that is not the reason. Apparently the Kages are trying to ally with the United Whirlpool Nation, and it would appear that Guy and I have been selected to be Tsunade-sama's guards for the meeting. The other Kages and the representative of the minor nations will also have 2 guards with them, Kakashi informed them. The response he got were many confused expressions being directed his way. Kiba though was the one to ask the question that was won their mind. What? Why do we need the help of a country that can't even use chakra? I mean they won't be of much help since they can't even perform jutsu, right? Lee may not be able to use chakra, but he could at least use the 8 inner gates, whereas those of the West can't. The thing though Kiba is that our leaders have come up with a hypothesis that the West have developed in a way we might not have imagined. An example of this would be that the Kages received the UWN's reply to their scroll today, and that it stated that it had been sent the day before. That kind of journey would normally take 3 days to arrive, but they did it in a third of the time. Sigh. Well, I have to get ready to meet the Hokage at the gates tomorrow morning, so, Ja-eni, Kakashi replied as he continued walking towards his apartment to prepare for the imminent meeting between the leaders of the elemental nations and the leader of the United Whirlpool Nation. The shinobi and villagers who had heard what the Jonin had said began to worry as they knew that the war against the Akatsuki was going bad. They just didn't know it was that bad. Meanwhile with the Akatsuki, it would appear that the Shinobi Alliance have turned to the west for help, Madara Uchiha said as he glanced at the figures that resided with him in the cave that contained the statue that held the biju that they had collected. Over time their numbers had diminished to him, Setsu, Deidara, Sasori and their temporary ally Orochimaru. Itachi Uchiha had been killed by himself when he tried to kill him with his back turned. It turned out that the man had never truly betrayed Konoha and had been ordered to massacre the Uchiha clan and then join their organization in order to keep track of them. Kisame Hashigaki had been killed when he tried to take on the Hachibi's Jinchuriki. The man had been able to defeat him, but not before falling unconscious and becoming easy for Madara to come and take him without resistance. Kakazu and Haiden had been killed by the Nibi's Jinchuriki and an unknown man that they still hadn't identified. The reason why the zombie brothers were dead when people thought they couldn't die was because their bodies were completely obliterated so that nothing was left. Pain, or Nagato as he was called, and Konan had been killed by Madara himself when he decided that he wanted one of his Rinnegan eyes. The pair had put up a tough fight that had even left Madara wounded for weeks before he fully recovered. Only to end up with destroyed Rinnegan eyes that were useless to him. We should easily beat them, They can't even use chakra, Deidara boasted as he flexed the mouths on his hands. Shut up, Deidara. You shouldn't judge people on appearances alone, Sasori advised as the others nodded along with him in agreement. Ku, I'll have my spies work on their strengths, and we will see if they are a threat. After all, I don't want any more extra obstacles between me and Sasuke-kun, Orochimaru hissed with a smirk in place as he summoned Kabuto to send a message to his spies. No matter. Zetsu, I want you to do the same as I don't trust the snake to give us all the information he acquires, Madara stated. As you wish, Zetsu replied as he sank into the ground, vanishing from view. Time skip, morning Konoha. Take care and good luck, Tsunade-sama, Hinata shouted as her and the other shinobi and villagers stood at the gate to bid her goodbye. I will, Hinata. Take care everyone, we should be back the next day or the day after, Tsunade replied as she, Guy and Kakashi waved farewell and started their trip to the Naha port in Kirigakure. IWA, Kuratsuchi-sama, look after Tsuchikage-sama, and IWA villagers shouted as said person grinned and waved in response. She and Akatsuki were her grandfather's bodyguards for the meeting and were just about to set off, if the Tsuchikage's back hadn't thrown itself out when he tried pick up a backpack. Oh. Damn this traitorous back of mine. Told you were too old to have the hat. Maybe you should hand it over to me now while we have the chance, Kuratsuchi joked as she only received a death glare from the Tsuchikage. Fanoki replied before all three used their ability to fly to get to the Naha port on time for the meeting with the cheers, and in some cases laughing, of the villagers and shinobi behind them. Kiri, make sure you take care of Mei-sama, Aoi, Chojuro, the Miss Shinobi shouted as they and the other villagers gave similar words of encouragement. No worries. By the time we come back the alliance hopefully we will have another ally to help us in our struggle, Mei announced as her villagers cheered in response. Let's go. We should be the first to arrive considering the port is in our nation, Mei said as the trio made their way past the gates to their village. Hi, Mei-sama, a nervous Chojuro said as he received a whack to the back of his head from Aoi. In my time men didn't break down like that. Break, Mei thought as a dark aura started to appear around her. I mean what happens when you are up and in an engagement with the enemy. Up engagement, Mei continued to think. Her dark aura becoming more dense. Turning to Aoi and closing her only visible her she gave him a sickly sweet smile as she said in an equally toned voice. Aoi, shut up or I'll kill you. Ah. What did I do wrong? Aoi exasperated as he jumped back a few steps in fright. Kumo, Dari, see. Make sure Reikage-sama is safe and keep him in line. Don't want his emotions to get in the way if he screws up. Kami, he almost did during the Gakage summit, Mabui said with amusement in her eyes as she and other villagers and shinobi bid their Reikage luck with gaining another ally. Don't worry, Mabui-san. Reikage-sama will keep his emotions in check. Right, Reikage-sama? C questioned as his companion smirked at the slight sweat the Reikage had when he was questioned. Why, yeah, sure, clears his throat. Well, come on now, Dari, see. Let's go before we are late. Ace stuttered slightly before recovering and finishing with a conviction in his voice that made many of the others smirk at the Reikage slip up in posture from his usually stuck-up personality. Many hours later at the Naha port, the port itself was very large. The docking being large enough to hold a whole street. Problem with this design being that the town and the port being small and compact in order to not use up any more space. Originally it was designed to hold what the elemental nations deemed as deep-sea ships that could not go into the shallows. What they didn't take into account was that there were vessels that were even larger than what they saw as deep-sea ships, and that is exactly what the 5 Kages and Mifune were facing, for in front of them a long way away was a huge ship that was made of metal. They also noticed that it also contained other metal-like things and that it could carry more men than they thought possible. And CV-67 aircraft carrier, Omai Tsunade stated as she and the other leaders of the alliance could only nod in surprise at how orderly the UWN's forces were. It was then they noticed that a number of differently clothed men boarded the strange metal objects that were resting on the deck of the ship. They then saw the blades on top of the objects start to spin at blinding speeds and, much to their shock, the objects started to fly in their direction. That was a feat that only the Tsuchikage and his top shinobi could perform. As they got closer they heard the chopping noise the objects made and saw the uniforms that, what they could only presume as, the soldiers wore were very odd to them. Imagine Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 US Rangers, desert version. The objects seemed to form a backwards triangle with the two on either side of the middle one further in front. Eventually they felt the force being projected from the rotating blades and had to use their arms to shield themselves from the dust being kicked up. My, what youthful ideas the West have brought, Guy shouted, seemingly unaffected by the force being exerted, though none were surprised given his insane training routine and his specialization in taijutsu. Soon the objects landed, and once the blades started to slow down the soldiers disembarked carrying weird objects, Colt M16A2, from their transports and lined up on either side, to form a path perpendicular to the middle transport. And, just like in Star Wars 4 when Darth Vader disembarks from his fighter in the Death Star, they then saw 3 figures stand up from the transport in rather unique-looking armor. They are dressed as Raidon from MGS4, including a trench coat. Only difference is that Naruto's is black, Yujito's blue and Fu's green. Also it is entirely removable. They have dual Fabrique Nationale 5 on their sides, and they each have a Colt M4A1 Sopmod strapped to their back. Naruto has a shotgun attachment, Yujito has a foregrip and Fu has a grenade launcher. All 3 also have ACOG scopes. Add in the usual daggers and serrated sword and that's their outfit completed. Once the leaders got a clear sight at the 3 they could only stare with open mouths in shock. They were none other than the only Jinchuriki that Madara still did not possess yet. Tsunade, Kakashi, Guy, Dari and C were more affected than the others, especially when they saw the sunny blonde hair of Naruto and the pale blonde hair of Yujito. And Fu's leader Shibuki can't be present as he is represented by Mifune. Walking down past his soldiers, who saluted him as he passed, Naruto made his way to the shocked leaders and he and his wives couldn't help but smirk at the frozen looks that were plastered on the leaders of the elemental nations' faces. Once he was in front of Tsunade he gave a small chuckle that made her pay attention to him specifically rather than absently. Well, Obasin, it appears that you are in need of some help. Why don't we find a better place to talk about this alliance that you and the others want? End Chapter 1. Chapter 2, Negotiations with the United Whirlpool Nation. No, it can't be, Tsunade thought as she looked at the armored man in front of her. The way he looked showed an aura of calmness, yet it showed authority and power beyond any she had seen before. Not even the Shodame, Nidame, her own sensei the Sandame, or the Yandame commanded such an environment that made her and the other leaders feel insignificant. Soon the chopping noise made by the strange transportation slowed down and eventually ceased altogether. It was then that everyone got a better look at their newcomers. Naruto, A panic-stricken Kakashi thought as his only visible eye widened in disbelief as he gazed at the student he so willing cast off. Even though he didn't teach said student enough to be considered his sensei to begin with. Honestly, a lecture on teamwork, that even he didn't stand by, and a small description of tree walking, that he didn't bother to help explaining to those who couldn't understand, do not count as teaching. Then a lot of emotion started to appear on his expression, the two most prominent ones being happiness and nervousness. Happiness from finding the boy, no man, after worrying about him for over a decade of his whereabouts, and nervousness because he was worried of Naruto's reaction to him and Konoha after everything they had done to him. Guy was on similar thoughts but was not as worried as Kakashi was on how Naruto would react to him personally because, unlike his rival, he never did anything to him in the past to create any ill will between the two. Yujito. The group heard a shout as all eyes turned towards the other females who were equally as armored as the blonde ex-Leaf shinobi, though their coats were a different color, Yujito's blue and Fu's green. Upon recognizing them, they discovered the two females were the Jinchurikis to the Nibi and Nanabi, and that their leader was the Jinchuriki. To the Kyubi, the Yellow Flash, Inoki muttered as he looked at the blonde with a slight fear in his eyes as well as a small sweat running down his forehead. Everyone now looked at him, but their attention was then drawn back to blonde when he gave a small laugh that somehow made the atmosphere less tense. I may look like my father, but I am not him. I'm his son Naruto Uzumaki, Shodaime Uzumakis of the United Whirlpool Nation and son of Minato Namikaze, the Yondaime Hokage, and Kushina Uzumaki, the Chishio no Habanero. Next to me are my second-in-commands and wives Yujito ni Uzumaki and Fu Uzumaki. We came here today to officially begin negotiations between your alliance and my nation, though there will be demands made and some may not be met. I hope that in the end everyone gains something out of it. Now do you have a room where we could all speak, please? Naruto announced in a kind tone that made the leaders think that so far the relations were going well, or so they thought. Yes, of course, please follow me, Mifune greeted with a neutral expression. Nodding back, Naruto then turned back towards the soldiers that were still standing in the same position as before. Okay, men at ease. Your orders are to set up a rendezvous point here and be prepared for immediate extraction. If you see anybody that has either a black cloak with red clouds printed on them or they carry a hideate with a musical note on them, then contact me immediately. Do not attack them unless they attack first, as we are not at war with them. That is what this meeting is about. However, be cautious around them, and if they seem to be heading to our negotiations, then you may engage them as well, but do not prolong the battle. Understood? Naruto ordered and received a clear hi Uzukage-sama from said soldiers. Turning back to the Kages, Naruto followed them into a big building, in which he assumed was the meeting place, with both of his wives following behind him. Negotiations room. The room itself was dark and it had 2 levels to it. On the bottom was a circular table with the insignia of each nation behind a chair on the wall, indicating where each person will seat. Above them were balconies where their bodyguards would stand watch over the proceedings. Once everyone took their seat, their bodyguards were told to go up to the stands. While the elemental nation's ninja climbed with using the tree walking exercise, Yujito and Fu just jumped up to the stands with little to no effort being used. This caused many of the shinobi present to stare wide-eyed. Nobody they knew could do that kind of jump, even with the aid of chakra. Only the use of the Shunshin no Jutsu could match that. But because of the sensitivity of the meeting, nobody was allowed to use Nin or Genjutsu to avoid others thinking it was the beginning of an attack. What the hell have you been up to, Gaki? Tsunade thought as she noticed that the armor they wore was very light, yet it offered protection from even chakra-enhanced weaponry. As everyone took a seat, Naruto took off his trench coat and laid it on the back of his chair, revealing to everyone his full body armor. In addition to this, he took off his weapons and placed them in front of him, on the desk. Once everyone was seated, Naruto took the time to observe his surroundings. Opposite him was Mifune. On his close left was Tsunade, next was A, then Inoki, then back to Mifune. After him was Mei, and then finally Gaara was on his close right, while Gaara made Kazekage. Good for him, at least one us was able to gain the respect they deserved, Naruto thought as he gave a small smile and greeting towards the redhead. Said man smiled as well and nodded his head in respect for his brother that he had dubbed because of what he used to contain, and the same burden that Naruto still carried. Mifune then stood up and addressed the table. As I represent all of the minor countries, I will be the one to oversee this meeting and will step in when needed. Please may all participants avoid fighting as it will cause problems for the Shinobi Alliance in the future. You may begin now, Mifune announced as he sat back down in his chair, while silence temporarily loomed over the room. While everyone were trying to think of the best way to start the meeting, Naruto was analyzing each Kage with his armor, and it displayed on his interface. And I am talking about those plates that move in front of Raiden's eyes as he fights, all of their known abilities and personality. Gaara no Sabaku, Godaime Kazekage and son of the Yondaime Kazekage. Although he has improved himself overall, he still relies too much on his sand, and so as a result he is still weak at Tai and Genjutsu. Plus his ninjutsu is heavily sand-based. Personality-wise he is still monotone in just about everything that is official and never lets his emotions rule his decision that isn't related to his family. The youngest Kage present, Naruto read on his interface as a hologram appeared of Gaara and the text appeared beneath it in a pale blue color. The picture though did not obscure his sight and it didn't affect his posture, so the Kages didn't know that he was getting information from them. Inwardly he sniggered when he predicted their reactions. First would be shock from the abilities shown. Second would be anger from the revealing of said information. Third would be demands for the technology so that they could be used against each other in the future. Tsunade Senju, Godame Hokage and granddaughter to both Hashirama Senju and Mito Uzumaki Senju. Medic Nin and is only one of 2 people to know her super strength jutsu, known to kill a person with 1 hit. Known to be the best medic in the elemental nations and has had to suffer the loss of both her lover, Dan Kato, and her brother Nawaki Senju. Has a slightly quick temper that can be taken advantage of. However, she has a deep regret for banishing me and wishing to make it up to me. Mental sigh. Depending on her actions from now on will determine her standing with me. A. Yandame Reikage and son to the Sandame Reikage. Only known user of the right and no Yoroi that enhances his speed to the point of being second only to Hiraition and ex-partner to Killer B. Faced my father during the Third Shinobi War and lost but barely. Is known to allow his emotions to rule him at times and was the one to call all the Kages together for the first meeting that resulted in the Shinobi Alliance. Anoki, Sandame Tsuchikage. Only known user of the dust release, and I would use the actual term for it but it conflicts with swift release, that enables the user to manipulate molecules and therefore gives them the ability to disintegrate anything on a molecular level. Only person alive to fight against Madara Uchiha and still live. Has had dealings with Akatsuki in the past and I respect him for his ability to fight, but as a person I do not trust him. He is indirectly a reason that my kind were hunted down like animals as he essentially gave them the finance for their organization. Mei Terumi, Godame Mizukage and leader of the rebel forces that overthrew the Sandame Mizukage. Known user of the Yotan and only known user of Futon style of ninjutsu. And do not get that confused with Futon. Futon means boil release and Futon means wind release. She is very neutral when it comes to politics and is known to make good decisions, however has an anger problem when references to her past love life. Rumors say that Akatsuki originated from her nation but our sources say it was Amigekure that it came from. Mifune, leader of the samurai nation Tetsu no Kuni. Has fought Sensho no Hanzo in the past. Is also neutral and doesn't like to be involved in shinobi affairs. Made an exception because the Akatsuki threaten everyone and not just the ninja. Soon Gaara mustered up enough courage to start off the proceedings. If I may be the first to open this discussion. First of all I would like to say that we are in greatly need of your help with dealing with both of the Akatsuki and the hidden Sound Village. What we mainly lack are the manpower, medical and other supplies that have become scarce. We were wondering if you could spare any to help win this war that would surely follow you if it were allowed to spread. I demand that you hand over Yujito to us as she is still a registered kunoichi under Kumo. I already lost B to the Akatsuki, I won't lose her to them as well. Shouted as he stood up in an attempt to be intimidating to the Uzukage. Sign from the predictability of the Reikage, Naruto turned and gave him a deadpan expression. Reikage Dano, as much as I respect you for trying to protect Yujito-chan, then why didn't you send a search party for her when she was attacked by the Akatsuki in the first place? When I found her she was fighting 2 Akatsuki and was close to losing. When I intervened and saved her I asked her if she wanted to go back to Kumo. Her answer was no and added that you probably set her up since apparently you never cared about her. She said that whenever she was mistreated you ignored her, but when B was mistreated you practically beat the offender to a bloody pulp. Then when she went missing my sources told me that you didn't even try to find her. But we have been informed that when B was captured you practically declared that all the other nations were at fault for losing people of our kind. Don't make demands that you are not entitled to. Naruto started off in an even tone but ended up loudly stating the Reikage's fault in the first negotiations. I looked down, finding the floor more interesting at the moment after being verbally assaulted and being correct in each accusations as he sat back down in his chair. Calming down, Naruto turned back towards the other Kages and he decided to make his opinion known. Now before anyone interrupts me I would like to make some suggestions. First of all, my soldiers are designed to fight battles and not to go into espionage or spy-related missions. With this in mind I can take care of the main front lines with your ninja in support, or using them to do one of 3 things, assassinating, sabotage, or information gathering. With me so far? Naruto questioned and receiving nods in response. Alright, since my men do not have a chakra network, or use chakra at all they cannot be used for many stealth operations that involve hiding in plain sight. Stealth operations we can do, but if it involves disguising ourselves as the locals then it will not work as it will look suspicious that they could not detect us leaking any chakra at all. Instead they would suspect that we are ninjas who can hide our chakra signature to a very high extent. Then I believe that we can leave the main fighting to your men Uzukage Dano. However, as part of these negotiations I am willing to have that seal we put on you that restricts your ability to form hand seals removed if you could provide us with the medical supplies we need. Tsunade offered as she wanted to repair her somewhat shaky relationship her fellow blonde. His response was a chuckle that, unlike the laugh near the beginning of the meeting, didn't have any humor in it. Hokage Dano, I know what you are trying to do and I do appreciate it. The problem is that Danzo, many of the leaders scowl at the name, used a different seal than the one you wanted. While it did do its purpose he also tweaked it so that it permanently stopped my ability to use hand seals, cue gasps from the female attendants, and deeper scowls from the males. Also because I had it on for a long period time it became a part of me and so can't be removed. Normally the seal used would seal my memories of hand seals away so that I couldn't remember how to use them. However, what Danzo did was use a seal that caused me great pain if I made the hand seals with an amount of chakra that exceeded the level set. So in short, I can still form the hand seals without chakra, or I can use jutsu that requires chakra but doesn't require hand seals. Such as the Rasengan, Naruto said as he received shocked looks from the other leaders in the room. The Kages themselves couldn't help but sneer inwardly at the mention of Danzo. He had caused so many problems for them in the past, the Hokage included, sending his root out to cause trouble all in the name of Konoha, or to be more specific himself. His belief that shinobi are emotionless tools was very disliked by everyone present, and was the reason Sarutobi was chosen as the Sandaime Hokage instead of himself. In recent years he has become more daring in operations, and that because of his old age he has become more delusional, so that he went from just wanting to be Hokage to wanting the whole world to be ruled by Konoha and essentially himself. He had even gone so far as to suggest Konoha betray the alliance with the other nations. Seeing that they were getting off topic, Inoki spoke up to get an answer to a question he had been thinking of since the idea for the alliance came about. Even though we all have had past grievances with Danzo, I question the effectiveness of your nation Uzumakis Dano. As far as I know, your forces will not be of much help to us considering that they cannot use chakra, nor do they have a chakra network. Inoki snorted as the Uzumakis' stern gaze turned to him. First of all, do not think for 1 minute that my nation will be under the command of the Kages present, nor their shinobi. Prejudices in the past have caused people in the UWN to be wary of people who can use chakra, even people like Rock Lee who may not be able to use chakra, unless it's taijutsu related, but still has a chakra network. In the face of this, my forces will only answer to shinobi whose orders are approved by my army's counterparts. Any shinobi who tries to force one of my forces to do an order will be considered a threat to my men and killed on sight or captured and put on court-martial. This also means that my army will not stay in any hidden village in the efforts to avoid conflict between allies. No doubt that there will be some fool either in my army or yours that will try to start something. As for their fighting prowess, I propose a challenge. I will face a shinobi or shinobis of your choosing without using chakra. You can even have a Hyuga use their Bikugan to be sure that I am not using chakra, and instead of my using my own gear I will use the standard equipment my men use to show you how efficient they can be, Naruto sternly told the Tsuchikage. The other Kages were thinking of possible opponents that would have high a chance of beating him, but before they could speak, Tsunade decided to give a proposition of her own. If I may ask my fellow Kages, may I offer the challenge of the entire Konoha 11 facing you Uzumakis Dano in one-on-one fights in Konoha's Chunin exam arena? They are all either Tokubetsu Jonin or fully fledged Jonin, and are a suitable challenge, especially since a Kage is still a powerful opponent even when they deliberately weaken themselves. Tsunade offered as the other leaders considered her solution. In truth, she wanted them to meet to get their problems sorted and off their chests. Back to the thoughts of the Kages, Emi thought it was a good idea. After all, the Konoha 11 were known to be a group of very skilled Konoha nin. That, and they were the first generation to pass, with 8 of them being clan heirs, 1 from a civilian councilwoman, and 2 being orphans, and that they barely survived their first Chunin exams, with only the Nara being promoted. And this confused me greatly in the canon. Naruto and Shikamaru are equally qualified to be Chunin. Shikamaru had the brains but lacked actual strength, and Naruto had plenty of strength but lacked brains, so they both stand on either side of the spectrum. Even then, Naruto could still come up with plans on the spot, whereas Shikamaru had to sit and think. That gives the enemy plenty of time to kill him. The only reason it didn't happen was because Temari hesitated and was confused by his thinking pose, and that officially they had beaten Orochimaru's personal Jonin bodyguards known as the Sound Five, despite the fact that in reality they were mid-Chunin in terms of actual power and skill. Yeah, very powerful. I will accept your idea if the other Kages agree. Naruto spoke cheerfully, but his voice seemed to contain anything but that. This was picked up by everyone there, but only the Hokage, her bodyguards, the Kazekage, and Naruto's wives knew why. Oh Naruto, I'm so sorry I couldn't stop them, Tsunade thought as she bowed her head and allowed her bangs to cover her eyes so as to not show how misty her eyes had become. Up on the balconies, what a fool I was, and now because of said foolishness I lost my student, though I never taught him anything really significant, and my sensei's son no less. Kakashi thought. Inwardly he was close to being depressed again, since he was thinking back on his team's genin days. He was supposed to have taught them how to survive in the world of shinobi. Instead he focused on one student because he thought he owed it to said student's clan and practically left his other 2 students to fend for themselves. One tried to defect and almost killed his comrade with the jutsu he taught him in the hopes of protecting them. Now he is a spoiled jonin who tries to take what he wants whenever he wants it. Another was a rabid fangirl that always tried to gain the attention his previously mentioned student, and still does. The only change was that she now had training in Tsunade's jutsu, and I know some people will be angry about the training with Tsunade, but I only really started to change from the canon at the Valley of the End where Naruto wins. So Sakura has already asked for training? As a compromise though, I have decided that instead of a fully fledged apprenticeship I have chosen to just some training to make her slightly better. Then finally was his last student. The one he abandoned in his hour of need and had earlier written off as a failure that wouldn't be assigned anything more important than gate guarding, whilst his comrades became either jonin or anbu. Now he is no longer his student, hasn't been for 10 years, and is now the leader of a nation that rivals all of the elemental nations put together, and has the population's full support. Yep, that can be disheartening for a teacher who was one of the best jonin in Konoha. Guy saw his companion's imminent depression and thought it best to bring the one-eyed jonin back to earth. Placing a hand on his shoulder, Guy brought Kakashi's attention to him as the man moved his head to meet the green spandex-clad ninja's calm face staring back at him. As if sensing what Guy was going to say, Kakashi smiled and turned back to the meeting. "Sai, my eternal rival, if you had listened to my advice from the beginning, then you probably wouldn't be seeing this. If only you hadn't been obsessed with honoring Obito's memory, then you wouldn't have been blinded to the actions you committed," Guy thought as he remembered the talk he had with Kakashi when he was given Team 7. Flashback. It was a nice summer's day in Konoha, and currently Guy and Kakashi were sitting in a barbecue restaurant having breakfast to prepare them for the day. "So my eternal rival, how youthful do you feel about taking on these youthful students of yours?" Guy exuberantly questioned. "Well, Sasuke, I'm sure will pass my challenges, and I am pretty sure that he will help his teammates pull through," Kakashi nonchalantly replied as he read his orange book. Upon hearing this, Guy's happy expression fell into one of confusion. "Are you sure, my rival? I read his mental examination reports. All of them state that he despises people trying to work with him." "Oh, I'm sure those are exaggerated. Besides, I am more worried about Naruto. The kid's a dope and can't even make do the Bunshin no Jutsu," Kakashi said, waving off Guy's question. "But he can do Kage Bunshin no Jutsu easily, and with the amount he can make, it's no wonder the Bunshin no Jutsu didn't work. Naruto-kun has too much chakra and wasn't provided with any advanced chakra controlling exercises except leaf balancing," Guy retorted. It doesn't matter. As soon as Sasuke activates his Sharingan, I'm going to train him privately so that he can master it, and protect his comrades with it," Kakashi answered back to the now slightly frowning Jonin. It was then that Guy realized something. Kakashi was describing Sasuke like he had Naruto's morals. Said morals were the same as his late teammates, Obito Uchiha. It seemed that Kakashi was trying to see him in Sasuke, but the problem was Sasuke was nothing like Obito. Obito was kind and was willing to work with his teammates despite how he felt about them. Sasuke, though, would kill his teammates the moment they stood between him and his goal to kill Itachi. "My youthful rival, as a word of advice, please move on from Obito's death. Constantly mourning him like this will only cause unneeded problems for you." But before Guy could get in another word, Kakashi had already used Shunshin no Jutsu to travel to the Kia Memorial Stone to mourn his friend for 2 hours before meeting his new team. A team that Guy believed would suffer because of Kakashi's unwillingness to move on. He was right. End flashback. "And now, because of your stubbornness, your team became the opposite of what they were supposed to be. All teachers want their students to make it as high as possible. You only wanted one to succeed and the other two to stay where they were. However, the one you expected to particularly fail became something beyond that of a simple Kage. His title may be a Kage, but his rule stretches across a land and population that equals all of the elemental nations put together. They support him and are willing to lay down their lives for him. His genius surpasses that of the Yondaime, and we didn't see it. Konoha lost its will of fire the moment Naruto was sentenced to be banished," Guy inwardly stated in a rare sense of seriousness. "With the Kages. Before we give our decision, we would like to know why you seem a little hostile towards the Konoha 11 Uzumaki Dano," Mei asked Naruto with a raised eyebrow in confusion. It was then that Naruto sighed before changing his mood to one of a kind of sadness that the others recognized as one related to past problems. Folding his hands on one another and leaning on his elbows on the desk so that his mouth was hidden, Naruto responded to the red-haired Mizukage. "That is because 10 years ago the Konoha 11 used to be the Konoha 12, Naruto responded, causing the other leaders, minus the Hokage and Kazekage, to look confounded at the blonde. Seeing that they needed a clearer explanation, Naruto continued to talk about his banishment. "Think about it, I am the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki, and the last time the Kyuubi was spotted was attacking Konoha, where the Yondaime Hokage defeated him, and I turned 26 years old last October 10th. Which is exactly 26 years since the Kyuubi's attack. I then grew up to become a shinobi of Konoha and graduated at the same time with the Konoha 11. I was placed on Team 7 with Sasuke Uchiha and Sakura Haruno, with Kakashi Hatake being our Jonin sensei. Time went on until the Uchiha defected from Konoha to Oto, and other members of the Konoha 11 along with me were tasked to bring him back. In the end it was a success when I came back with the Uchiha on my back. However, that was when things changed for the worse for me. I was accused of being too forceful even when it was clear that I was wounded more than the Uchiha. I was sentenced to be banished, and between the time from being sentenced to actually being exiled I was tortured by some of my former comrades because I hurt the Uchiha. Then my own sensei declared that I was never a student of his, Naruto concluded. It was then that his interface showed all of the statistics of each of the Konoha 11, and saw that they hadn't changed at all, just that they were more proficient at their specialties were. An example being Tenten had only become better at weapons with very small improvements in her other areas. As he looked around he saw disappointing glares being sent to the Hokage, who was looking down in shame at how she allowed his torture to happen under her nose. Seeing the disappointing looks, Naruto actually started to sneer at the other Kages except for Gaara, who was the only Kage not trying to bore his gaze towards the Senju. "Don't look at her in that way, you're all responsible for similar transgressions against our kind. That Sachikage treats our kind like objects with constant references to them as it, and even helped the Akatsuki by hiring them in the past, the Tsuchikage frowned. The Reikage didn't care if they weren't close to him personally, as shown by his past negligence to my wife before I met her. The Reikage looked down in shame. The Mizukage didn't bother to use the only Byakugan user she had to check the Sandaime Mizukage and see if he was under a genjutsu, which was proven correct, and could have avoided a civil war altogether. The Mizukage also looked down in self-loathing. So far the only village that seems to have my respect is Suna, and even then I am still cautious of them since they used to treat Gaara the same way as me, Naruto told them with an edge in his voice. It was disgusting with the way they immediately tried to blame someone when they were just as guilty, and if not more guilty. After the other Kages had regained their composure, the Kazekage decided to speak up. Well then, I would like to officially declare that tomorrow we will go to Konoha, where Uzumaki Dano will face the Konoha 11 in single combat whilst using only the resources available to his soldiers, Gaara stated as the rest of the table nodded in agreement. What will the stakes be? Naruto said as the others started thinking of possible results. If you fail to beat even one of the Konoha 11, then all the Jinchuriki will be put under our authority, and the UWN will also be under our control, Inoki harshly said to Naruto, who scowled deeply at the man and his threatening tone. Kyuubi growled from within Naruto's mind that now resembled a large forest instead of the cage it once was. Calm down, Kurama. He may be a team just like the Uchiha, but it wouldn't serve any purpose to kill him now, Naruto inwardly replied to his tenant. In addition, he also heard low growling from his two wives, who were thinking similar things along with their Biju. How dare he, even now when he so desperately wants our help, he has the gale to threaten us like that. Kitten, settled down. Naruto-kun has it under control. Don't worry, that Tsuchikage will get what's coming to him later on. That old man, he's going senile. A moment ago he was practically begging for our help, now he is demanding we become his slaves. I know, young one, but don't worry, Naruto will know what to do. He has proven many times that he can do the impossible, and he can do it again here. I agree to the terms, however should I when I want the fire daimyo to give me what should have been mine? Yuzushi Obicure. The Kages were stunned at the demand. It was a rather important area for the elemental nations, rich in materials and minerals worth 2 daimyos. May I ask why you would demand such a thing? A asked in a curious tone. Leaning back in his chair, Naruto fixed the man a stare that made the man shiver inwardly. Apart from the fact that I am an Uzumaki, meaning that Uzushio is mine by birthright, but also the stakes are equal. My country for Uzushio. In fact, when looking more closely at it, my united Whirlpool nation is much more valuable than Uzushio, so be glad that I am not demanding for more, Naruto replied. Before anyone else could challenge him, Mifune stood up. All right, now that has been sorted, I would like to end this meeting and that we will meet again in Konoha to evaluate the effectiveness of Uzumaki Dano's army. Mifune finished. Yes, also as you have seen the kind of transports we have, I will be meeting you all on top of the Hokage monument, Naruto added as the table cleared themselves and headed out of the building, along with their bodyguards. Outside of the negotiations room, Naruto, Yujito and Fu were walking at brisk pace to reach their Bell UH-1 Iroquois, Huey, helicopters that were waiting for them to depart for the aircraft carrier waiting for them returned to discuss with his generals the results of the meeting. They mainly walked in silence until Yujito couldn't take the suspense any longer. You are playing a big risk here, Naruto-kun. If you lose, then everything we have worked so hard for will be in ruins, Yujito chastised her husband as the trio made their way back to their transports. Naruto sighed as he ran a hand over his head to clear his thoughts and ease the tension he obtained during the meeting. Looking at the concerned expression, his face softened as he spoke in an equally soft voice. I know, Yujito-chan, but rest assured I received the Konoha 11's foot individual profiles during the meeting, and trust me, they haven't improved much to be considered much of a threat to me. How so? Was the quick remark from his other wife. Looking thoughtful, Naruto went for the scenario that best suited his statement. Which member would be best to describe his point? Lee, no. He had no choice but to specialize in taijutsu. Tenten, no. She could have diverged her type of weapons, as before she only really used thrown weapons. Then when he was almost out of members, it finally hit him. Niji. Of course, all he really progressed in was the Juken and hadn't widened his variety of jutsu to make him a well-rounded shinobi. Then there was Sakura. Her mentality of a fangirl would make her vulnerable even with training from Tsunade. After a moment of silence, his wife stared at him as they continued to walk without any reply until he snapped his fingers as if he had an epiphany of some kind. Niji Hyuga, for example. His clan pride would not have allowed him to practice anything that wasn't approved of by the Hyuga clan. This means that his arsenal will mainly consist of Juken and other Hyuga clan jutsu. Also there is Sakura Haruno. She may have had training from Tsunade, however she hasn't gotten rid of her fangirl and superior attitude. That will be her downfall if goaded in the right way, Naruto finished explaining to his two wives. The two looked like they wanted to retort but decided to not. They had asked for an example and he gave them two, which was more than they asked for. Fine then, but I still say you're taking a big risk here, Yujito huffed as the trio finally made it to the Hueys that now were starting to rotate their blades for the imminent order to take them back to the CV-67 where the rest of the army was located. Helping his wives board the helicopters, he gave the order for the pilot to take them back to the headquarters, HQ. After getting a high Uzukage-sama, the 3 helicopters took off and made their way to the large ship that many people were still gawking at, only to now stare in awe at their transports as they went past them. on the CV-67, codenamed Baseplate. Upon arriving, the leader of the UWN and his wives were greeted with numerous salutes, to which he returned with a smile and gave an order for a basic outfit for fresh soldiers to be prepared for him for tomorrow. Many of his subordinates were confused at the request but knew not argue with their superior when it was something important. As soon as everyone went back to their duties, Naruto and his wives headed down towards the war room. This was the place where Naruto, his wives, captains and sergeants came to discuss strategies and other things that needed to be attended to. After passing numerous staff who saluted him and he returned, they soon reached a white door that had the words War Room written on the front in the font of impact. Next to it was a fingerprint and retinal scanner that only allowed those that meet the requirements access to the room. Naruto used his own hand and eye to be recognized through the scanner, and after a green light shone on the door there was a robotic voice that stated access granted. This was then followed by the few clicks of a number of locks being released until the door automatically opened to reveal the room itself. The room was a brightly lit room with a red wooden table in the center. The floor was covered in a pale blue carpet, and black leather chairs were situated at the table. Said table was rectangular in shape at one end with a chair slightly bigger than the others at one end and had a UWN flag on the wall behind. On the opposite wall had a large computer screen where many details could be listed. The walls themselves were colored in a deep maroon color, and imagine something similar to Call of Duty Black Ops where Mason meets Kennedy. All of his captains were already sitting in their seats, and had their sergeants standing at attention behind them, and all of them in their non-combat uniforms. And imagine Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, Shepard's uniform, desert version. Each of their berets had a red swirl badge to signify their allegiance to him. In his army there were 4 ranks: private, sergeant, captain and general. Privates were shown by a red swirl mark just above the elbow on each side of their arm sleeves. These people were considered the lowest of the low, or beginners. Their rank was worth slightly more than genin rank because all soldiers started their service at the age of 18 instead of 13, and were seen as more mature than children, especially when they had already gone through at least 10 years of education before being asked if they would like to join up. Some would join up and some wouldn't. If they did join, then they would go through 2 years of training before being sent out. Some might think that when compared to the Hidden Villages 3-year course that the UWN's course was crap. Bear in mind though that most of the academies in the Hidden Villages mostly taught history and didn't teach the hardships of being in the military, making it look like a way to attain fame and power. In the UWN all soldiers were trained to expect the worst from killing people, to being interrogated. Overall the UWN may not teach as long as the Hidden Villages academies. They do however teach the realistic and practicality side of being a soldier. Heck, the 10 years of education before joining the army was considered to be better than the Hidden Villages academies, especially since in the academy students were taught to recite what they were told, whereas the UWN public schools, and remember I mentioned in the summary that this FIC would be a slight X-over with the modern world, were taught to interpret history and come up with their own theories to situations instead of acting like blind sheep or vengeful ignorant/arrogant people, like a certain hidden village whose name begins with K. After 10 years of education they are given the choice to join the Royal Uzumaki Army, or for short the RUA, for 2 years. And I know, not very original, but I couldn't come up with anything else, sorry. If anyone has any better names please send them and I will think about changing it, to which after that they are assigned to a squad under the command of a sergeant, captain or general. Back to the topic at hand, next rank to follow them is sergeant, and were the only people considered non-commissioned officers, NCO. Their rank is shown by 3 red swirls forming an upside-down triangle. They have more experience than the privates and have command over them. Therefore privates must listen to their orders unless told otherwise by either another sergeant, a captain, or a general. Captains were a different matter as they, along with generals, were known as commissioned officers, CO. Their rank was shown by 3 golden swirls sewn onto the shoulders of the uniform. To become one, a person must have the following requirements. 1. They must have attained the rank of sergeant. 2. They must have 3 years of experience. 3. They must pass the captaincy exam, and imagine a more harder version of the Chunin exam. 4. Finally, they must be supported by all the generals. Their responsibility lies with commanding a squad of men, and that will be explained later on, along with their sergeants, and they only answer to the generals. Then finally the generals. These people are the highest rank in the army and have the responsibility of running it. Only Naruto, Yujito and Fu held this rank, and this was symbolized by the armor they wore, that only generals were allowed to wear. The trench coats they wore before were not their official coats, as they were funnily enough still being made, and pic can be found on profile. Only the coat is needed, ignore everything else. Anyway, if they ever wanted a new general, then one of them would have had to retire and pass it on to someone else. Seated at the table were 5 captains. Each one had a speciality that his/her squad excelled in. Akio Fujita. She had brown hair that just reached her neck, had crimson eyes and stood at 5 feet 5 inches. She was the commander of the 1st Infantry Squad, and it was mostly a general combat unit that revolved around the saying jack of all trades, but master of none, or in her case it would be Jill of trades, but master none, whichever works best. Next was Sato Hokkaido. He had sandy blonde hair that was flat and cut short to it almost being non-existent, had jade eyes and stood at 5 feet 6 inches. He was the commander of the 2nd Infantry Squad and was the same kind of outfit as the 1st Infantry Squad. After him was Takahashi Yamagata. He had red hair that also flat and cut short, but only to about an inch's worth was left, had violet eyes and stood at 5 feet 9 inches. He too was in command of an infantry squad, the 3rd infantry squad to be exact, and it also was the same kind of unit as the 1st and 2nd infantry squads. Infantry squads aside, the next captain was Inoue Kyoto. She had raven hair that was tied up into a bun, had coal-black eyes and stood at 5 feet 4 inches. Unlike the other captains, she was in charge of the 1st medic squad. They did not do any fighting. Instead, they set up field hospitals, worked at already existing hospitals as doctors and nurses, and they trained field medics to be assigned to each of the other squads in case one of them become wounded. Yamamoto Okayama followed her. He had blue hair reach his chin but surprisingly didn't obstruct his view, had brown eyes and stood at 5 feet 8 inches. He was in command of the 1st Airborne Squad. They were to man anything that involved the air, ranging from jets and bomber planes to helicopters and nuclear strikes. Following him was Sakamoto Kumamoto. He had green hair that was cut the same as Takahashi, had blue eyes and stood at 6. He was the captain for the 1st Armor Squad, who were to command all land vehicles from boats to tanks. Lastly was Kinjo Okinawa. He had brown hair pulled into a low ponytail, had honey brown eyes and stood at 5 feet 7 inches. He was in charge of the 1st Supply Squad, whose responsibility was to make sure that supplies were always available, ranging from bombs to medical kits. Upon seeing their generals, they all stood up to attention and saluted simultaneously. Uzukage-sama, they chorused at the same time. Naruto smiled at the professionalism of his army. They were a cross between the Hokageji's will of fire and Danzo's idea of shinobi tools. Both had merits and both had faults. Naruto viewed the world in a slightly different light that closely resembled the theory of yin and yang, that so long as one thing existed, the opposite would also exist. So long as there was light, there were also shadows, and where there were shadows, there was light. There could never be one color, only different shades of gray. The perfect example being the situations between the East and West. The East were in constant war and lost family and friends. People hardly found any life-lasting peace and had to struggle to survive, either from physical problems like killings by shinobi or mental problems such as prejudice. This led to the East gaining a very dark shade of gray. The West, on the other hand, found peace and unity. Friends and family prospered, and most losses were due to either old age or unfortunate accidents or incurable diseases. Therefore, people were able to live safe lives and not have to constantly train and kill to survive, and thus the West gained a very light shade of gray. At ease, captains paused as the captains relaxed their stances. Now first, I would like to say thank you for attending this meeting, as it affects everyone here and it revolves around the call for an alliance from the elemental nations. Please may you take your seats, ladies and gentlemen. Naruto greeted as the captains took their seats and awaited for Naruto to continue. Seating in the chair at the end of the table, and Yujito and Fu moving to sit in the chairs immediately next to him, Naruto picked up the remote control for the screen on the opposite wall and switched it on. Alright, the alliance was called for by the following people. Tsunade Senju, Godame Hokage of Konoha. The screen gave a flash and blipped as an image of Tsunade appeared and covered the whole wall. Wolf whistle. Damn, that lady has huge knockers. Dash, slam, shut up, pervert. Inoue whispered harshly to Sakamoto and retracted her fist from his head, which now sported a rather large swelling. This caused many in the room to snicker at the man's suffering before a cough from Naruto told them to focus, though he and his wives had smirks adorning their features. Cough. Yeah, well, I wouldn't try anything. She is actually an old lady, and uses a genjutsu to look young, Naruto said, causing many at the table to openly laugh at the gaping mouth Sakamoto now had. Anyway, back to the reason at hand. She, along with Gaara no Sabaku, the Godame Kazekage. A picture of Gaara appeared. Anoki, the Sandaime Tsuchikage. Another picture showed, but this time of the Tsuchikage. Mei Torimi, the Godame Mizukage. The next picture showed Mei as the Mizukage. The Yondaime Reikage. The picture of him shocked the generals slightly at seeing at how bulky the man was, and noted that he seemed to have become the Reikage mainly because of strength in body and not mind. And Mifune, leader of the samurai in Tetsu no Kuni, asked for an alliance between their shinobi alliance and our united Whirlpool nations. Safe to say that the negotiations went as I expected, Naruto stated as more pictures started to show until all the leaders were now on the screen. After getting their appearances down in detail, Sakamoto paying extra detail to the Mizukage, they all noticed what Naruto had said at the end. What do you mean, Naruto-sama? Akio asked as the other captains listened into his response. When I went to this meeting, I expected it to be a slow in progress, and suffice to say I was right, because since this army can't use chakra, the Tsuchikage was convinced that we would not be able to provide anything of value. So he made a bet with me, Naruto replied as the captains became angry at the accusation. What were the rewards and conditions, Naruto-sama? Kinjo questioned as the others nodded in anticipation. The stakes were the united Whirlpool Nation and Yuzushiogakure. The bet itself is a one-on-one tournament between the Konoha 11 and I. The rules being that I must only use equipment available to fresh soldiers and that I get to rest between each match. Naruto finished explaining the bet to his captains. The captains themselves grinned at the prospect of seeing some of the most elite shinobi of Konoha, and their leaders past tormentors, humiliated by their leader with only the equipment available to new soldiers. Then they would gain more contracts with traders, thereby gaining a higher economy. The best part was the experience their soldiers would gain by being escorts to the traders. Finally, they could use Uzushio as a main port to their ships, as it was the only elemental nation that had the deep seas available to make building ports faster. So when will this happen? Takahashi asked with a grin. Grinning back, Naruto replied, tomorrow at Konoha's Chunin exam stadium. We, and I mean all of us aside from the sergeants. Sorry guys, but I need you on watch in case something happens. The sergeants smiled and nodded in understanding. Thank you for understanding. And so we will be given seats for everyone but me to watch the event. There will also be potential clients that may want to do business with our nation. From there I will face each of the Konoha 11 in one-on-one combat matches, to which I must win all of them to win the bet. Nodding back in response, Naruto decided to give his captains some advice for when they arrive at Konoha. Before we finish this meeting, I would like to give you some advice for when we arrive in Konoha. Firstly, as soon as we arrive, I want you all to activate your hidden cameras. This way, if you are attacked, we will have proof that you were only defending yourselves, as is within the rights of visitors. Second, control yourselves. The people there are capable of saying some very harmful things, and if you must get angry with them, then only insult back, do not ever throw the first punch. Third, people will be curious about you and will try to gain information indirectly through you. This is where my trust with you is at its highest, for I trust you not to reveal anything they can use to their advantage. Then lastly, be on guard. These people are known to bring in mobs to beat on people. Kami knows how many I was subjected to. If they do bring a mob to hunt you, then stand your ground, use your flares to signal us, and use lethal force if necessary. Just make sure they are after you first, and they pull the first move. Other than that, all I can say is enjoy yourselves. Oh, and if you happen to go to Ichiraku ramen stand, then please tell them I've missed them and I am willing to offer them a place in the UW, and especially for them if they want to move, Naruto advised his captains, who nodded in response. Okay, then meeting concluded, and be ready at 9 a.m. for transportation. Naruto finished as everyone gave him and his wives salutes before giving orders to their sergeants, and leaving the room. Once they were gone, Naruto let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Damn, that was a long meeting, he thought as he wiped away the sweat that had been forming on his forehead with his hand. He was about to stand up before he was brought into a three-way kiss with his wives. The taste of their tongues and mouths were heavenly to the blonde, as they had their own unique flavors. Yujito's had a hint of fish and milk, whilst Fu's tasted mostly of oranges. A few minutes passed until the need for air became apparent. Yujito-chan, Fu-chan, what brought this on? He questioned them. Their response was to grin before both started to grind themselves against him, causing all three to become aroused. We believe that you need some relaxation before the big event tomorrow, Naruto-kun, Yujito purred as she placed her hand on his crotch and squeezed him slightly through his clothes. Glancing at the clock, he noticed that it was only 7 p.m. Plenty of time for some fun, he thought mischievously as he heard a go kit from Kurama. Grabbing his wives by their waist, he disappears, and, that will be explained later on, to their bedroom to relax. And it was on that day that the west side of the ship wished Kami have mercy on those on the eastern side, for the sounds of Naruto making love to his wives certainly didn't. At the same time in Konoha, Hokage's tower, Tsunade sat at her desk, and next to her were the other Kages, all of whom had blank faces. In front of her desk were the Konoha 11 along with their sensei, Iruka and Enko. As Tsunade eyed each of the occupants, many felt a chill run down their spines, especially those who she knew were responsible for Naruto's suffering. Tsunade, seeing how nervous they were, decided to present them the challenge that was agreed to. Okay, the reason you are all here is because when we met with the Uzumakis, one of us accused his support as being inadequate. Tsunade then glared at the Tsuchikage, who humphed and looked away. Before she could continue, she heard a snort from a certain raven-haired avenger, and, he doesn't know Itachi is already dead. Turning towards the Uchiha, she took note of him and his history. Sasuke was wearing the traditional Jonin outfit and wore his Hidate on his forehead. He also carried a tanto strapped vertically to the back of his right shoulder. After Naruto was banished, he was immediately reinstated as a shinobi and was given no punishment, much to Tsunade's chagrin. In fact, he was praised even more for getting rid of the demon, and it downright pissed her off that the man responsible for banishing the person she saw as a little brother. Something to say, Uchiha-san? She growled as the man gave his usual smirk. Yeah, actually. Why do we need help from them? They can't even use chakra. In fact, I say that we invade them and take over the West. Then enslave them as they should have been the moment they lost their chakra, Sasuke said with Sakura cheering him on. Mainly of the Konoha 11 wanted to disagree with them, but honestly didn't know what the UWN was capable of, so they kept quiet. Sasuke was about to rant on more but was silenced by his sensei, who grabbed his shoulder tightly. Sasuke, was you there at the meeting between the Uzumakis and the leaders of the Shinobi Alliance? Kakashi asked the Uchiha, who shook his head and was quiet. No? Well then, Uchiha-san, it'll be best that you keep quiet, because whatever they lack in chakra they made up for in technology, Tsunade snapped. Sasuke gritted his teeth and wanted to yell at the Hokage, but decided against it, and went back to brooding and coming up with numerous ways to kill his brother. Boy, was he going to be disappointed. Now that that is sorted, let me tell you about the bet. The stakes were rather high, to say the least. You, the Konoha 11, will face the Uzumakis in a one-on-one battle tournament. The rules include that the Uzumakis must be allowed to rest between matches should he want to, and that the Uzumakis must use only equipment that are given to fresh soldiers. The rewards are if the Uzukage wins, then Hai no Kuni must give the UWN Uzushigakure and all that it contained before the Fire Daimyo claimed it. But if the Uzukage loses, then the UWN all that it has will be given to the Shinobi Alliance without question, Tsunade announced as looks of shock made their way to the other occupants of the room, minus those who already knew. The guy must be an arrogant as well as an idiotic leader if he wanted a losing wish like that. Sakura insulted as the people who were at the meeting looked at the pink-haired Kunoichi with an "are you an idiot" look. Well, that is what you think. Now though, I would like to conclude this meeting at an end and wish everybody a nice day. Tsunade concluded as the other Kages nodded and left the room to go to their hotel rooms for the night. The Kazekage though sent a small glare to the Uchiha and Harino on his way out, though the Uchiha scoffed and the Harino glared. Once they had gone, Tsunade took the time to observe the Jonin and Tokubetsu Jonin that now stood presently. The Konoha 11 sensei hadn't changed at all except for getting older. Iruka hadn't changed either except that he was slightly cold towards his old students for disregarding his teachings on looking after comrades. Anko had changed slightly, only difference being that she no longer was a Tokubetsu Jonin, but a fully fledged Jonin, though it took a lot of convincing the council to allow her to take the exams. Niji Hyuga, a Jonin, and wore the standard Hyuga Jonin robe, and, apart from Sasuke and Naruto, all of the Konoha 11 are wearing their Shippuden outfits. His attitude had changed greatly from his genin days, namely he had dropped his entire fate complex and wasn't cold to everyone unless he believed they deserved it, like a certain Uchiha and Banshee. Shikamaru Nara, a Jonin, and wore standard Jonin clothes. He was still as lazy as ever, though his intelligence was showing more now than ever, and he had been increasing his physical training due to the war. He had also become the head of the Nara clan after his father was killed in battle with some Oto Jonin. Chuji Akimichi, a Jonin, and wore samurai-like armor so that he could use his family jutsu efficiently, and he grew his hair out more. He still ate as much as he did before, and he was still quite cheerful, since his father passed on the title to him, and retired. Shino Abirame, a Jonin, and wore a big coat that covered him completely. He took over his clan when his father became too old to carry the title, and so became clan head. He was still as stoic as ever from his genin days, though he did show a bit of emotion from time to time. Ino Yamanaka, a Tokubetsu Jonin, and wore a more older version of her genin outfit. She was the clan head, but her father still worked in the TI, torture and interrogation, department. She was also more level-headed from her genin days, her abuse of Naruto before his banishment being the most influential. Kiba Inuzuka, a Tokubetsu Jonin, but was not a clan head, and wore a dark jacket and pants. His partner, Akamaru, had grown to a height that allowed Kiba to ride him if needed. His attitude hadn't changed much, still brash and hard-headed, though he was a little bit more calmer than before. His mother was still clan head, but was planning to give him the title soon. Hinata Hyuga, a Tokubetsu Jonin, but was also not a clan head, and wore a blue and white coat and pants. She was still shy, but only it had lessened down by a lot. She was due to be the new clan head, but the clan elders were giving Haishi trouble with it, claiming that she wasn't good enough. Today she was still hurting over what she had done to Naruto, and was waiting to apologize to him when she got the chance, especially when shortly after he was banished, and she found out the truth, she broke down crying and sobbing. It took 2 weeks to get her back on duty, and when she did she was for a time quiet and unresponsive. Tenten, a Tokubetsu Jonin, and wore a white top and red pants. She had gained the title of Konoha's weapons mistress over the time. She would constantly use her skills in weapon using to gain a reputation. She hadn't changed much in terms of attitude, but no longer fawned over Niji as much as she did in her genin days, and unlike Sakura she wouldn't let it cloud her judgment. Rock Lee, a Jonin, and wore the exact same thing as he did in his genin days, but also wore the Jonin vest along with it. He was so alike guy that many people got them confused, and the only way to tell them apart was if you knew them on a personal level to make the differences. Sakura Harino, a Tokubetsu Jonin, and wore a red tank top and a pink skirt with black biker shorts. Apart from being a medic nin, she had not changed at all. In fact, apart from the jutsu Tsunade taught her, she was basically the same from her genin days. Still a fangirl and still annoyed everyone that didn't do as she ordered. Recently the girl had been demanding Tsunade to give her the slug contract and pass on the title of slug sage to her. Tsunade said no, and that the contract would be passed on to her first apprentice, Shizen. Alright, now that they are gone, I would like to say that the Uzukage is a very powerful person. In fact, when faced with the challenge he was confident, not arrogant, that he could do it. Also, I would like to say that we all know the Uzukage personally. Tsunade stated as the other occupants, minus those who knew, thought on who it could be. It's Naruto, isn't Tsunade-sama? Hinata immediately said as the ones who didn't know snapped their heads to her in shock. It made sense since the only other person they knew personally, not quite right their lady, was Naruto. They were even more shocked when Tsunade nodded and opened her mouth to explain, but was cut off by a screech from Sakura. That baka is the Uzukage. Ha, we sealed his ability to use hand seals. He can't have become powerful without them, Sakura screeched as the others winced slightly at her loud voice. What are you talking about? Lee can't use hand seals, and look at him, a full Jonin using only taijutsu. So I wouldn't go underestimating him. After all, many of you had done that before, and look where that got you, Tsunade countered, pointedly looking at Sasuke and Niji. So the Dobe is the leader of the West. This'll be easy, Sasuke arrogantly stated as he smirked again. I wouldn't be too sure of that, but if it's what you think then so be it. However, do not go complaining if he beats you. Personally, I want him to win. Konoha has taken everything he should have had and made it their own without giving anything in return for it. Tsunade snapped at the Uchiha who scoffed at the thought of the dobe being special. What could the dobe have had that was so special to Konoha? Tsunade smirked, and for some reason that made Sasuke very nervous all of a sudden. I'm glad you asked that. Firstly, the Uzumaki clan were the ones who made the best seals, including the caged bird seal used by the Hyuga clan. When the Shodame Hokage married Mito Uzumaki, the Hyuga clan had asked for a seal to keep the Byakugan safe. She did, but she didn't put in the painful part of the seal. That was the Hyuga elders doing by bastardizing it. Next was the fact that due to the close ties with the Senju, the Uzumaki allowed Konoha to use their clan symbol as a sign of friendship between the two nations. Today it is used on our Hyuga and Chunin and Jonin vests as a swirl on the back. But now the people don't know the origin of the symbol and now shame it by wearing it, especially those who abuse Naruto. Finally, Uzushio is Naruto's land by birthright, since he is the only known Uzumaki of the royal Uzumaki clan of Uzushiogakure. Tsunade finished giving her long-winded speech. The others were shocked at how much Naruto's clan was worth to them, and some began to question themselves. Some even began to imagine what it would be like without their symbol. It made them shiver at the thought. Right now, though, you need to prepare for tomorrow. You will report to the Chunin exam stadium to battle the Uzumakis in single combat. I will leave it up to you to decide the order of who will fight. Dismiss, Tsunade ordered as everyone bowed, minus Sasuke and Sakura, and disappeared in a series of shunshin. When they had gone, Tsunade swiveled in her chair to look out the window over the once great Konohagakure that her grandfather founded and that had now lost the ideas that he wanted it to believe in. I can only hope he doesn't permanently cripple them, and no doubt the council, well, the civilian council to be precise, will be furious to hear the news. Then the elders and Danzo will push for him to be killed or kidnapped and made into a human weapon. Sigh. Tomorrow's going to be a long day and I am going to need a lot of sake to get rid of the headache that is going to come. Naruto, even when you're not doing it intentionally you still cause me headaches, Tsunade tiredly thought, but had a small smile on regardless. Picking up her sake bottle, she poured herself a cup, gave a brief toast, downed the alcohol in one go and prayed to Kami have mercy on her when the time came, because tomorrow's event certainly won't. Meanwhile at the Akatsuki base, I see so the missing Jinchuriki have been found and it turns out that the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki is the Uzumakis of the United Whirlpool Nation. This is both good and bad. Good because I can now have the tools needed for the Suki no Mikikaku. But bad because we may have more enemies to deal with, even though most of his army will stay in the UWN to guard it from us. Unlike those Kages, I will not underestimate them. It would only lead to our downfall, especially since when applied to Naruto Uzumaki his opponent tends to lose. Zetsu, keep an eye on them and report to me the results of this bet made. Everyone else be prepared for the future, Madara ordered before disappearing using Jikuken Ito. Orochimaru was surprised that the Kyuubi brat was the leader of the UWN but wasn't concerned about that. No matter, I will soon have the Sharingan from Sasuke-kun, and when I do I will gain the Mangekyo Sharingan. Next I will trade them for Itachi's eyes and then gain the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, and then the legendary Rinnegan. And with that Orochimaru slivered back to Otogekyo where he proceeded to make more plans for the future. Chapter 3. The Demons Return and His Back with a Vengeance. CV-67, codename Baseplate. Beep 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 B-slam. That was the sound of Naruto smashing his alarm clock to pieces as he slowly opened his eyes, to see the wonderful view of both of his wives sleeping on either side of him. Yujito was on his left side and Fu was on his right, both with smiles on their faces as they snuggled into him. He chuckled slightly before deciding it best to wake them by bending his head down. He planted kisses on both of their foreheads, causing them to stir in their sleep. Eventually the pair started to awake and both yawned in synchronization, to which he found to be cute when both wiped the sleep out of their eyes before they concentrated on him. Smiling back at him, the two women kissed him on lips as their form of mourning. Well, that sure is one way to wake up to a beautiful sight, especially after what we did last night. Naruto smirked as they broke the kiss and winked at his wives, who blushed deeply when they remembered last night's activities. Yujito then lightly slapped him for the comment. Naruto-kun, stop being a pervert, Yujito playfully reprimanded. That only caused all three to laugh lightly. It was then that they caught sight of the clock on the opposite wall and noticed that it was 8 a.m., meaning that they had an hour to get ready before having to meet the captains at the Hueys for their departure to Konoha, a place that Naruto was in no hurry to arrive at all. I think it's time we get up. After all, it wouldn't do good to come late and disappoint everyone, Naruto said as all three began to change into their uniform and eat breakfast. After they ate breakfast they made their way to the launch deck of the aircraft carrier. On the way they received numerous salutes, to which they returned and proceeded to climb the corridors until they finally reached the launch deck. On the deck, 3 Hueys were stationed in a line, and in the cockpit were both pilots that were doing final checks on the machines to make sure they were working properly. In front of them stood the captains and 15 soldiers. The 15 soldiers were standing at attention, and in 3 ranks of 5. The captains stood a few feet in front and facing them. When they saw Naruto, Yujito, and Fu arriving, Akio began the drill. Commanding officer on deck, salute, she finished yelling as each member of the group saluted their generals. Said generals marched in sync until they stood in the center between the captains and the privates. At ease, men, Naruto ordered as the soldiers withdrew their hands from their foreheads and placed their hands behind their backs whilst widening the space between the legs in a more relaxed stance. Once they were done, Naruto thought it best that he give the advice he had given his captains the previous day, as they would be being inserted into a potential hostile country. They needed to be aware of the tension that was sure to come about whilst in Konoha. Now, first of all, I want the first rank and the first 2 people on the left in the following rank to take 1 step forward. The first rank, containing 5 soldiers, and the other 2 soldiers took 1 step forward completely simultaneously. You 7 will be bodyguards for captains Fujita, Hokkaido, Yamagata, Kyoto, Okayama, Kumamoto and Okinawa. You will defend them until told otherwise by either a captain or general. We will be traveling to Kanehigakure and our ETA is 1,200 hours. The east is a very hostile area and you will treat everyone there with caution. When we arrive, you will activate your hidden cameras. This will serve mainly as evidence in case you are attacked. In the event that you are attacked, you are allowed to use lethal force. They may also come at you in a mob. If so, use your flares to signal us and stand your ground until reinforcements arrive. When we arrive, we will head to Konoha's Chunin Exam Stadium, where I will face the Konoha 11 in one-on-one matches. You will be guarding the captains in their designated seating area and will prohibit anyone from entering unless given permission by either the captains or generals. After that, we will stay at a hotel where tomorrow the negotiations will continue. Then we will rendezvous with the Hueys, codenamed Hawk, and extract back to HQ. In the meantime, everyone else is to secure the rendezvous point and make sure no one unfavorable tries to sabotage us or gain information on our armed forces. Understood? Naruto finished as he waited for their replies. Sir, yes sir, they chorused all together. Right face, Sato stated as the soldiers all turned 90 degrees clockwise so that they were now facing the Hueys. Mount up, Sato continued as each rank marched in sync towards each helicopter, and proceeded to board them and check their weapons and other equipment to make sure they were in good conditions. When they were all seated, Naruto, Yujito, Fu and the captains also boarded the Hueys as the rotating blades started to pick up speed and dust. Upon taking his seat, Naruto pressed his right index and middle finger to his ear in order to activate his codec. It was a very advanced form of communications that allowed all of his subordinates to contact him and, if necessary, allow the views of their hidden cameras to appear on his interface. The best part of it was that it practically invisible unless you were up close to him. Okay, we'll be moving in a reverse triangular formation. Hawks 1 and 3 will be at the front whilst Hawk 2 will be at the back, and keep an eye out for anyone suspicious. This applies specifically to those who wear the attire of the Akatsuki or wear an Oto Hideate. Confirm orders. Sir, yes sir, was the resounding response as the Hueys took off and headed towards Kanehigakure with the cheers of the soldiers still on the ship following them across the water. As the helicopter swept past villages, rivers and forestry, Naruto couldn't help but reminisce the experience that he once had with the continent, and despite the fact that he didn't like the hidden villages, he couldn't help but enjoy the feeling of nostalgia as the fresh air whisked past him and he closed his eyes for a moment before sighing in relaxation. Upon opening them again, he looked at the serious expressions on each of his soldiers' faces and had a small flashback on how he got them to be disciplined. Flashback. The hidden villages system is crap. They are too lenient towards them and allow dangerous personalities to come to fruit, especially since they allow them to become legal adults as soon as they pass their Jonin Sensei test. Naruto thought as he stared at his clock and tapped his left index finger on the desk in a smooth rhythm. He noticed these flaws when he thought back on his experiences. Sakura and Ino were allowed to continue their fangirl tendencies. Sasuke was still able to be an avenger. Chuji could stuff himself. Shikamaru could still be lazy. Kiba could still be hot-headed. Hinata was still shy. Shino was allowed to invade the privacy of his comrades with his insects. Lee could still be too loud. Tenten was still allowed to only specialize in weapons and not advised to widen her range of jutsu, despite her ability to perform nin, tai and genjutsu. Then finally Niji was still able to rely on his juken as a Hyuga and was not told to also widen his range of jutsu, especially since his Byakugan and high chakra control, which was required for juken to be utilized, could be used for medical jutsu to prevent the loss of life when on missions. Each of them had major flaws that could be taken advantage of. No, what Naruto needed was a system that allowed the soldiers relax and be serious when on missions, as well as make them become well-rounded soldiers that could adapt to any situation. He knew how many times problems had come about on missions because his comrades would allow their faults to rule their decisions or their weaknesses were exposed and ultimately brought more danger than needed to the mission. Example being Niji's strength was only in Juken whilst his other skills were academy level, or Sasuke and his revenge-driven ego. An idea then came to him as he stopped tapping the table with his finger. That's it! Naruto inwardly shouted, causing him to wake up Kurama from inside his head. What is Kit? He questioned as he took a yawn and stretched out to click his joints in place. I just came up with a system to allow my men relaxation but remain serious on missions and allow them to be adaptive. Naruto replied as the kitsune raised an eyebrow waiting for the answer. How can you do that, Kit? All those ninja in Konoha and the other hidden villages only know discipline when their kages or leaders yell at them. Turs. In peace, each soldier will have 6 months relaxation where they are not required to do any missions and can use the time for themselves whilst also being required to train to meet the standards we give. Then they must spend 6 months on duty and are expected to be serious about it, and not allow their personal lives to get in the way. In war, the time spent on duty will be increased due to the constant fighting, and the relaxation period will have to decrease. We will also teach them not to complain, as they would have been trained to accept the risk of discomfort, and that they had the choice to not join but did. Lastly, we'll also give tests later on to make sure that they are still fit for service, and anyone who isn't is either retrained or discharged if they reach over the limit of times they're allowed to fail. Kurama thought about the idea and admitted that it had quite a lot of merit to it. It would especially help the UWN avoid the problem of insubordination, and as a result the UWN could avoid the consequences caused by them, such as a war because a soldier killed a high-standing official from a foreign country because they insulted them. He was even more convinced of this when he remembered that some of the shinobi wars were started because of less provocative activities. Okay kid, it sounds like a good idea, specifically since it would mean less trouble for you as you do run a nation that rivals all the elemental nations put together, Kurama stated as he went back to sleep. Naruto's sweat dropped at his tenant's ability to just sleep. He had to be lazier than the Naras. Meanwhile in Konoha, a certain pineapple-haired Chunin sneezed, breaking his concentration from the shogi game he was playing and sending the pieces flying over at his ex-sensei. Troublesome, someone must be talking about me. Damn, I was so close to winning that round. Sigh, guess the score is still 100-30 and to Shikamaru no less. I knew he was a genius, but this takes the rice cake, thought a certain smoking Sarutobi. Anyway, Naruto grabbed his ballpoint pen and started writing down the orders for the new system he wanted implemented for his army. End flashback. It was then that he noticed a wooden crate that was on the helicopter. On top it had the word standard military outfit in big bold impact font, and below it in a smaller font was the list of what it contained. 1x standard combat uniform. And Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, Ranger outfit, Forest version, 1x first aid kit, 2x flashbangs, 2x smoke grenades, 3x M67 fragmentation grenades, 1x Beretta M9, 5x9mm ammunition magazines, 15 rounds per magazine, 1x stun knife, 1x gas mask, 1x thermal/night vision goggles, 4x ration bars, 1x water canteen, plus other necessities. The crate itself was missing the standard Colt M16A2, but Naruto had denied it as he believed that the rifle was only really necessary when facing numerous opponents at once, and not in one-on-one fights. Looking towards his wives, he saw that they were staring out over the continent as well, probably thinking back to their time here as well. He thought before closing his eyes to rest before he would have to face his former comrades. His thoughts were spot on as his wives were thinking back on their time in the elemental nations. Yujito was remembering the only good times she spent with Team Samui that included Karui, Omiri and Samui as their leader. Fu was thinking back on her only friend Shibuki, the leader of Takigakure and also a friend of Naruto when he was still a part of Team 7 and was tasked to escort him back to Taki to rule it. In fact, due to unforeseen problems he ended up saving Taki, although his sensei only seemed to praise the other two. Looking back to their husband and then glancing at each other, they both came to the same conclusion. We're not going to let anyone hurt Naruto-kun or either of us because of their bitterness. That we swear on. Meanwhile in Konoha, the Kages, Mifune, the Konoha 11, their sensei, Enko and Irika were all standing atop the Hokage monument that now had Tsunade's face added to it. Tsunade herself was pacing back and forth, biting her thumbnail every so often with a look of worry on her face, though nobody who knew of her connection to the blonde Jinchuriki would blame her, as she did view him as a surrogate little brother. The Konoha 11 had mixed feelings. Some people were curious as to what their friend now looked like and how he became a leader to a continent that had basically the same problems as them. These were Shikamaru, Shino, Lee and Chuji. Then there were people who were nervous about meeting the man who they had beaten 10 years ago. These were Ino, Hinata, Kiba, Tenten and Niji. Finally there were those who wanted nothing more than to beat the man to a pulp and steal all that he had made to fulfill their own desires, namely Sasuke and Sakura. The Konoha 11 senseis, along with Irika and Enko, were wondering what the blonde looked like after 10 years, aside from Guy and Kakashi who already knew but refused to divulge any information on him. Many though shivered when they heard Enko whisper to herself all the possibilities that he could look like as well as how he had grown, in more ways than just height-wise. The Kages and Mifune were just thinking of ways of how Naruto could beat any of the Konoha, and so far they couldn't come up with anything. The only thing they thought he could fight with was hand-to-hand combat, and weapons, and even then they were sure it wouldn't compare to the Konoha 11 since they can use chakra and he can't. It was 12 p.m. when the Kages, Mifune, Guy and Kakashi heard the familiar chopping sound of the hues. They glanced at the others who were looking around wondering what the noise was. What is that sound? Was the question that was generally being mentally asked amongst those who had not encountered the helicopters. Looking out over Konoha they saw the hues approaching them at high speeds that they themselves would be hard-pressed to match. Those who hadn't seen them before wondered how on earth a nation that had no access to chakra could make something that could achieve flight, a feat that only a few in IWA could do. They were not the only ones staring up at them in confusion and awe, as many of the Konoha villagers and ninja were thinking the same thing. What the hell? They heard Kiba shout as everyone was forced to hunch over slightly as the hues started to land in the clearing behind the Hokage monument. As soon as the rotating blade stopped moving, the shinobi and samurai were able to stand at their full height again and gazed at the men and women standing before them. Naruto, his wives and his captains stepped out of their transports first and formed two ranks, Naruto and his wives in the front and his captains behind them. The other soldiers were still on the helicopters unloading the luggage everyone had brought with them. Naruto and his company gave a small bow in respect before he decided to greet the leaders. Good evening Hokage Dano, Kazekage Dano, Mizukage Dano, Sachikage Dano, Reikage Dano and Mifune Dano. He then glanced impassively to the others in the audience who all shifted slightly, except two who glared at him. Inwardly rolling his eyes at his ex-teammates' childish behavior, Naruto continued his introduction. Along with me are my commanding officers of the United Whirlpool military. May I introduce Generals Yujito Uzumaki and Fu Uzumaki. After them are my captains, Captain Akio Fujita, commander of the 1st Infantry Squad. Captain Sato Hokkaido, commander of the 2nd Infantry Squad. Captain Takahashi Yamagata, commander of the 3rd Infantry Squad. Captain Inoue Kyoto, commander of the 1st Medic Squad. Captain Yamamoto Okayama, commander of the 1st Airborne Squad. Captain Sakamoto Kumamoto, commander of the 1st Armor Squad. Then finally Captain Kinjo Okinawa, commander of the 1st Supply Squad. Once Naruto had finished, Yujito, Fu and the captains all gave a salute which confused the leaders but responded with a slight bow to show their respect. Welcome Uzukage Dano. I believe that we should all depart to the stadium where you can change and then we can commence the tournament, Mifune stated monotonously as the Kages. And Naruto nodded in response. Turning back to the Hueys, Naruto called out, "You know your orders." At that moment each soldier immediately leapt into action where 5 of the 7 bodyguards marched to each of their assigned captains, whilst the other 2 picked up the crate and brought it off of the helicopter. The remaining soldiers went about setting up the area so that they could sleep there whilst also being easily able to respond to any attack. The position Naruto and his group formed where Naruto and his wives were at the front, the captains were behind them, along with the 2 carrying the crate, and the other bodyguards formed a protection circle around. While walking through the village, the group got many confused looks from the populace due to their odd appearance, which changed to glares when they recognized their leader. The Kages and their group were sweating slightly when they saw the looks being given and hoped that none of them would try anything stupid. Hey, isn't that the QB brat? Monster should have died. They should be arrested and executed just for existing. No doubt those other people are being controlled by some genjutsu. As the insults continued being whispered, the ninja of the group who cared about Naruto and his company started to sweat even more. Some even took a moment to observe their reactions. To their surprise, none of their guests were showing any physical reaction to the negative treatment. They could tell through their eyes that they were annoyed, but other than that nothing. Most of their own would have showed some kind of discomfort, but these UWN soldiers were acting as if nothing was going on, though they did tense when the looks changed from curiosity to hostile. Soon they arrived at the stadium that was currently empty but would be full of people once the matches began. Alright, now that we have arrived we can begin. Uzukage Dano, you and your men carrying the equipment may go to the changing room to change and then go the arena where you will face the Konoha 11. Your generals, captains and their bodyguards may sit with us in the Kage box. From there on we will begin the matches, Tsunade said as Naruto nodded and motioned for the privates holding the crate to follow him. Time skip. 2 hours later. The stands were packed with both civilians and shinobi, with the Kages and Naruto group being on the Kage box that had been expanded to better accommodate the extra weight. Seeing that everyone was in position, Tsunade stood up and began the announcement. Welcome everybody. Today the Shinobi Alliance has arranged for a tournament between Konohagakure's Konoha 11 and the United Whirlpool Nation's Uzukage, Naruto Uzumaki. At the mention of the Konoha 11 many cheered, but they changed to boos and many other negative insults when they heard who the Uzukage was. Demon! We should have kill! Silence! Tsunade shouted, quietening the crowds with a burst of ki. Once they were settled down, Tsunade went back to announcing the part of the bet. Now this was decided because the effectiveness of the Uzukage's military was brought into question. In response, a challenge was presented. The Uzukage will face the Konoha 11 in one-on-one battles. Should he lose to any of them, his nation will be under the immediate control of the Shinobi Alliance. But if he defeats them all, then Uzushiogaku will become a part of the United Whirlpool Nation. Now let's proceed to the first match. Tsunade finished as she received cheers from the people in the stands. When she sat back down, she turned towards Kakashi and the other Jonin sensei who were stationed as the guards for the Kages during the event. So Kakashi, what was the layout of the matches that your students decided on? Looking over to his superior, the copy Nin gave her his patented eye smile, which really annoyed people since so far nobody had seen his face other than his late father, late mother, and the late medic Nin that saw him at birth. Well, Hokage-sama, apparently the Konoha 11 still think that Uzukage-sama still has a crush on Sakura and that should be enough to win. After her it is Ino, Hinata, Tenten, Shikamaru, Shino, Chuji, Kiba, Lee, Niji and then Sasuke. Tsunade raised an eyebrow at the statement about Sakura. First match, Naruto Uzumaki vs Sakura Haruno. Begin. But isn't Naruto Aria? Winner, Naruto Uzumaki. What? Minutes earlier, Naruto walked out of the dark hallway into the arena where he was met with the familiar scene of the forest clearing that he had been competing in to become a chunin over a decade ago. It looked cleaned, and although many of the trees and plants had been replaced and moved around, it didn't stop the small flashback he had that showed his match with Niji. He was no longer wearing his armor but instead wore the standard combat uniform for his soldiers. On his right hip was the holster for his M9, and on his lower back was his stun knife placed horizontally. Also he had his other various pieces of equipment on his person with easy access to them, walking into the arena full of confidence that wasn't backed up by mere arrogance, but instead confidence that was supported by skills. When he heard the comments made about him when he was announced, he mentally shook his head at the stupidity that had come about. It made him think how blind or idiotic the previous Hokages could have been if they believed Konoha to care for all of its inhabitants like family when they have shown time and time again that they don't care about anybody if it was only slightly not human. To add insult to the injury, the civilians are trying to control the shinobi as if they were their servants, and if they were challenged they would say the demon is controlling them. Then again, he hasn't seen firsthand what the village was like before the QB attack, so he couldn't judge them on that, though he was not allowing them to use that as an excuse for what they had done. They had been told to treat him like a hero by their prized yondaime, and they spat on it. Whatever happens to them is because of their own doing, not the Hokage's. Upon seeing who the proctor would be for the tournament, he turned a bright red at seeing Anko Midarashi, standing in the center of the clearing in the same outfit she had worn during the Chunin exams. It was always baffled him on how she could wear something like that and not in the least feel insecure about it. When said woman turned and saw Naruto standing there, she gave him a big grin that seemed to stretch across her face. Hey there, stud. So you ready for your first match? Yeah, I'm ready. Let's get this show started then. Naruto nodded, giving a smile back to the snake using kunoichi. Right, by the way, when this is over, do you want to get some dinner together after this? She asked in surprisingly nervous tone. Raising an eyebrow, Naruto thought back on his interactions with the woman. She wasn't mean to me like everyone else, and in fact she is treated to a lesser extent like me because of her past affiliation with Orochimaru, so maybe, he thought before replying. Sure, but anything further and we will need to talk to Fu-chan and Yujito-chan about it. I don't want to start dating anyone that would upset my two wives, so it will be their decision overall. Sighing, Anko nodded in response. She knew it would be difficult, but it didn't stop her. In fact, she saw it as a kind of challenge. To be honest with herself, she had had a slight crush on the blonde when she was assigned to be his hidden guard when his birthday came about. He wasn't beaten constantly, just on his birthdays that coincided with the QB's attack. Other than that, though, he was ripped off when shopping, if he was even allowed to shop there in the first place. He was insulted by just about everyone in the village and was sabotaged in the academy by the teachers, except for Irika. In fact, Naruto in a way had suffered worse than Gaara did, despite saying otherwise during the Chunin exams. This was because even though everyone knew about Gaara's status, he was never actually beaten because of Shikaku. He certainly wasn't ripped off by store owners, and he knew who his parents were despite thinking that they hated him. The only thing that he had over Naruto in that department was that he was robbed of sleep, which was fixed recently when the Ichibi was ripped out of him and Lady Chiyo sacrificed herself to bring him back to life. Back to the subject at hand, before any of them could continue they heard footsteps from the other side of the clearing. Naruto Baka, quit harassing the proctor, Sakura said as she scowled and stomped towards the center. Naruto's response was to just put on a blank expression. Once they were all ready for the fight, Anko went over the rules. Now the rules of these fights will be as follows. Everything goes. The match will only end when one gives up, is unconscious, is dead, or I step in. Naruto Uzumaki cannot use any chakra-based jutsu. Lastly, there must be no outside interferences. Failure to comply with these rules will result in automatic disqualification. Understood? Receiving two nods and acceptance, Anko raised her right hand above her head. First match, Naruto Uzumaki vs Sakura Haruno. Begin. Anko brought her hand down and jumped out of way to avoid the charging banshee that was Sakura Haruno. Cha! I'm going to beat your face in for surpassing Sasuke-kun, she shrieked as she charged in with a sloppy left hook, intent on crushing his skull with a fraction of Tsunade's strength. Naruto remained stock still with that blank look on as Sakura closed the distance between the two. 10 meters, 5 meters, 2 meters. Kalia, Sakura shouted as she swung her fist at the blonde. Naruto sidestepped to the right and delivered a hard elbow blow to the back of her neck, causing her to be temporarily stunned and hunch over as she lost her balance. Naruto then raised his right knee and struck right in the solar plexus, causing her gasp as her breath was robbed from her, as well as causing her to throw up her lunch. The pain was too much for the dieting, physically weak medic Neen and passed out, falling none too gracefully into a puddle of her vomit that smelled awful. Seeing that the pinkette was out for the count, Anko shouted, "Winner, Naruto Uzumaki." In the Kage box. Seems like they were wrong, Inoki snorted as the other Kages nodded in agreement as Sakura was taken off the field by stretcher bearers. Meanwhile, the captains of the United Whirlpool military were snickering at the match. They hadn't seen anything so pathetic in their lives. Even fresh soldiers fought better than that when they started training. Back in the arena, Naruto and Anko were sorting out the finer details of their date when they saw Ino approaching. When both of them were ready, Ino wanted to apologize for her and the other's treatment of him before his exile. Naruto, before we start, I want to say we're all sorry about what we did to you before you were banished. Can you please forgive us for our foolishness? Her response was for Naruto to close his eyes and sigh. To be honest, he didn't want to bring this up until after the fights, so he decided it was best to answer the girl with something along those lines. Yamanaka-san, this is not the time, nor the place to be discussing this kind of sensitive topic. I will speak to you and the others when the fights are over, he replied as he got into his fighting. Withdrawing the stun knife that was sheathed horizontally on his lower back, he proceeded to stand with his right leg in front of his left, held the knife in the reverse grip in front of him along with an open left hand, and crouched slightly. Ino nodded and got into her family's stance as Enko came up to begin the battle. Second match, Naruto Uzumaki vs. Ino Yamanaka. Begin! Ino threw several shuriken at the blonde before blurring through hand seals as she performed her clan's most famous jutsu, Shintenshin no Jutsu. Ino shouted her hands in a triangle-like shape and aiming at her fellow blonde opposite her, up in the competitor's box. Damn it, Ino, that jutsu won't work, Shikamaru cursed as he facepalmed at her carelessness. What do you mean? Chuji questioned, who was munching on some crisps that he had brought with him. Chuji, that jutsu requires the target to be immobilized because of the backlashes it demands. In the beginning her mind moves slowly and in a straight line, so all Naruto has to do is dodge to avoid being affected. Then as it takes time for her mind to return to her body, Naruto can walk right up to her prone form, and it's game over for Ino. It's the reason why we have the Ino Shikacho trio, because it's our jobs to keep our targets from moving so she can get a clear shot, Shikamaru groaned as he took out a cigarette and lit it before taking a puff. Back in the arena. True enough, that is what exactly was happening, for as soon as Ino finished her jutsu, Naruto dive rolled to the right and ran straight to Ino's prone form. He then placed his stun knife at her neck and Enko decided to call the match. Winner, Naruto Uzumaki, Enko shouted as many of the ninja from the other villages cheered for the good fight, whilst everyone from Konoha were still stunned as they couldn't realize that the man down there was the same teenager they mistreated 10 years ago. As Ino came to, it took her a moment to realize that she had lost. Getting up, she walked over to the exit. Just before exiting, she looked over her shoulder towards Naruto. Naruto, promise you will speak with the Konoha 11 after this. We really want to apologize for what we did. And I said yes, now go, we have another match to do, Naruto replied as Ino nodded and finally was out of his view, only to be replaced by a blushing Hinata. Once everyone was ready, Enko began the next fight. Third match, Naruto Uzumaki vs. Hinata Hyuga. Begin! For a moment neither of them moved, until Naruto moved his hands to his shirt and started to remove it. Fear, it's hot. In fact, it's so hot I need some more air, he said as his shirt was halfway off, causing a lot of females to blush at his toned abs and chiseled chest, and many males to glare and jealously. And Naruto-kun, hot, Hinata muttered as she pressed her index fingers and tried to get rid of the blush on her face. Soon it was too much for shy and timid Hinata, and it was much worse as she started having perverted thoughts. The result was her blasting off from a geyser of a nosebleed and pass out from both blood loss and the impact from falling. Naruto smirked as he put his shirt back on as everyone else sweat dropped at the victory. At seeing everyone's faces, he scowled. Hey, not my fault she's weak against my physique, Naruto said as everyone was snapped out of their dazes. A winner, Naruto Uzumaki? Enko asked uncertainly as she was also in a daze, but not from Hinata's loss. The stadium stayed quiet as Hinata was carried out of the arena as Tenten took her place. They may have been beaten easily, but I can assure you that you'll break a sweat facing me, she stated boldly as she got into a fighting stance. Good was all Naruto said as he too got into a fighting stance. Fourth match, Naruto Uzumaki vs. Tenten. Begin! Enko shouted, this time jumping away as she knew Tenten's jutsu were of the widespread kind. Indeed, she was right. Almost as soon as she had begun the fight, Tenten had already brought out her sealing scrolls and proceeded to unseal her weapons from them as they sailed at the ex-Konoha shinobi. Unlike the others, Naruto was forced to dodge or deflect her weapons as they came flying at him from almost all directions, though it was easy for him to do so judging from the smirk on his face. Good, get annoyed so that she uses that big scroll on her back. Then I can go on the offensive, he thought as he dodged a kunai that missed him by a centimeter. Tenten though was getting frustrated. She had thrown all kinds of weapons at him only for him to either dodge or deflect him with that strange knife of his. Upon looking at it, she knew it was a high-quality weapon and would have had stars in her eyes if she wasn't in the middle of fight right now. Looks like I'm going to have to use that, she growled as she jumped on top of the farthest wall and took off the large scroll on her back. Good, she's doing it, Naruto thought as he pulled out an M67 frag grenade and took off the safety pin but kept the safety lever on. Tenten through the scroll overhead shouted out one of her most powerful attack. Soga Tensasi. The sky literally became black from all the tools raining down on Naruto, who finally let go of the safety lever and tossed it at where Tenten was following the barrage. Boom! The resounding explosion caused many to gawk at the power behind it. It was twice as powerful as an explosive tag. How on earth did Naruto design that? Was the general thought going through the Kages and ninja, though there were plots of stealing the technology from a certain Raven, Pinkett and Council. But that wasn't the end of it. No, in fact the shock wave caused by the explosion caused the weapons to go flying off course, leaving Naruto fine in the middle of a circle, surrounded by Tenten's weapons. Speaking of Konoha's weapon mistress, Tenten lay unconscious on the floor with multiple burn and stab wounds caused from the heat and shrapnel from the grenade. As she was carried away, Enko let out a whoop of joy. Finally! Some actual fighting is happening. I was afraid Naruto-kun would be able to win this without even trying. Winner, Naruto Uzumaki, Enko shouted in joy as said blonde chuckled at her antics. Kage box. It looks like Uzumaki Dano's military are competent. Wouldn't you agree, Sasuke Dano? May specifically asked Inoki, who humphed and looked in another direction, though on the inside he was regretting his decision with every victory. Naruto's captains and wives were smirking at the complete awe shown to something they considered a minor tool. Imagine their surprise if they saw a nuke, was their general thought as each one laughed inwardly. Arena floor. Damn, you're cutting through them like butter. Are you sure you're not cheating? Anko mocked as Naruto laughed heartily at her. No, Anko-chan, I can assure you that I am not cheating. The reason why I am winning is because I am mainly using tactics. Whereas most of the ninja today use flashy jutsu and have honor, I do not. To me it's about doing the job right, and the only time this won't happen is if civilians or hostages are involved, as I would focus on their safety, and unlike the hidden villages here, who make the shinobi look like heroes, all of my soldiers are taught both the good and bad about the military. They know that heroes are only made by the leaders when in fact all it was them defying the odds. Take the Yondaime Hokage for example. The possibility of winning against an army is small with one man, but with the Hiraishin he won against the odds and so he was named a hero. What they fail to realize though that one man's hero is another man's villain. Whilst in Konoha he is seen as a hero because he saved a lot of Konoha ninja, in IWA he is seen as a villain because of the IWA ninja he slaughtered, causing pain for any loved ones or relatives back home. Naruto informed Anko as the next opponent, Shikamaru, turned up. Troublesome. Let's get this over with, he drawled out as both took fighting stances. Fifth match, Naruto Uzumaki vs Shikamaru Nara. Begin. For a minute or two neither combatant did anything until Naruto spoke up. Hey Nara-san, you don't look like you want to be here, so why don't you just drop out? After all you won't gain anything you could use, Naruto asked in rhetorical tone as he rolled his neck in preparation. Fine, I forfeit. As soon as the words processed through everyone's heads they all face-faulted and started shouting obscenities at the lazy genius. Naruto and Anko were standing there with wide eyes and mouths open as they couldn't believe that actually worked. Oh, okay, winner. Naruto Uzumaki, Anko stammered out as everyone continued to insult the Nara as he walked back to the Konoha 11. I can't believe that actually worked, I was only joking. I didn't think he would actually do it, Naruto quietly said. Both proctor and combatant shook their heads to keep their focus on the topic at hand. Competitor's box. Shikamaru, you lazy ass, you didn't even try anything, Ino scolded Shikamaru as he gave her a blank look. If you had been looking more carefully you would have seen that I had him trapped in my cage main no jutsu. However, when he rolled his neck without me doing it first, I know my jutsu wouldn't even faze him. Ergo no need to fight a match that would be too troublesome, Shikamaru intelligently spoke as he took another cigarette, and lit as he gazed down to continue watching the fights, ignoring the looks being sent at him from the others. Down in the arena. You know at the rate you're going at we could schedule our date for as soon as this test finishes, Anko said as Naruto shrugged his shoulders in response. It was then that they spotted Shino coming down to begin his match. It's good to see you, Naruto-sama, after such a long time, Shino said monotonously whilst giving a small bow in respect. You too, Abirame-san, Naruto replied, mirroring Shino's bow as both took up their positions. Sixth match, Naruto Uzumaki vs Shino Abirame. Begin. As soon as Anko had finished her announcement, insects started to fly towards Naruto, who remained still again as before. Up in the Kage box, what is Uzumakis Dano doing? Surely he knows that what he is doing is a great risk, May questioned as the other Kages apart from the Tsunade nodded in agreement. Just because it is a large risk doesn't mean that it will fail, it means that the likelihood of success is small. Naruto however has proven that every single time this has happened to him, he pulled it off, Tsunade said as the others thought back on what they know of him. We said the same thing when we first saw him, but now look at him. He united all of our nations and peace has been achieved there unlike this place, Akio added, muttering at the end to only allow her companions to hear it, causing them to snicker slightly. With Naruto and Shino, Naruto waited until all of the insects covered him entirely. He then discreetly pushed the button on the stun knife to activate electrical shock to be initiated. On cue all of the insects let out a loud screech as they burned and Shino was too shocked to do anything against it as the surge traveled across them and back to him, shocking him as well. Soon it became too much and he collapsed from the pain, both physical from the electricity, and the fact that his insect colony was almost destroyed. The crowds were once again stunned by the fight. They thought he couldn't use jutsu, but he hadn't used any chakra. Therefore somewhere along the line he had found a way to use lightning without the need of chakra. It was shocking to say the least. The Kages themselves were in the same state of mind. Many of them were just blank on the inside as they were still staring in awe at what had transpired. Naruto's group though were laughing internally at the looks everyone had. It seemed that they believed everything relied on chakra. Boy were they in for a wake-up call. Winner, Naruto Uzumaki. Damn, I'm bored having to repeat that, Anko ended complainingly. Don't worry, there's only 5 matches after that. I would like to treat you to a homemade dinner, Naruto said as Anko licked her lips in anticipation. Can I join? A voice questioned as the pair looked to see Chuji appear in his samurai armor. Sorry Akimichi-san, that's for a date. Now let's begin, Naruto stated as he stood in his combat stance again. Chuji nodded and did the same. 7th match, Naruto Uzumaki vs Chuji Akimichi. Begin. Chuji was about to start doing hand seals until he saw Naruto take out a ration bar and start eating. What are those? Chuji asked in curiosity. Oh, just a protein bar. Helps with conserving energy. Want one? Naruto finished, handing out one of the bars towards the unsuspecting Chuji. Sure, Chuji replied as he took one and ate it. As soon as the food touched his tongue, his eyes narrowed and his face turned a shade of green as he threw it away and started throwing up. He was too preoccupied with trying to keep his lunch that he didn't notice Naruto walk up to him and knock him out with a simple chop to the neck. Winner, Naruto Uzumaki. What was that you used against him? Poison? Anko added as she finished announcing the winner. Grinning, Naruto brought up the ration bar that he had given Chuji. Nope. The food was just horrible. You see, those were emergency food rations. They're kind of like the soldier pills, except it replenishes the body's energy instead of chakra. The problem with them though is that they taste terrible or tasteless. But hey, my men are trained to eat stuff like this until they can eat with a straight face like I did then, Naruto said as Anko took a bite from the one he had eaten. Almost immediately she spat it out again, making retching sounds, but not actually throwing up. Fuck, that's crap. This should be used for torturing people, not as an emergency food supply, she choked, throwing the pathetic excuse for food back to Naruto, who shrugged and finished it. This prompted Anko to make gagging noises to mock him, to which he returned with shaking his head with closed eyes and a small smile. Kage box. You know, if that kind of food can even make an Akimichi vomit, then I really don't want to try it, Gaara said in his usual monotone voice. The other Kages agreed quickly, deducing the same as the Kazekage. You're not the only ones, was the thought process of Naruto's group. Despite their experience and tolerability with the stuff, it still tasted horrible. Arena. Hey Naruto, good to see you again, buddy. Arf. Kiba and Akamaru said simultaneously as they both stood opposite Anko and Naruto, who were discussing some everyday things about their lives. Naruto though looked blankly at the pair before he spoke in a rather cold tone. Inuzuka-san, do not speak to me in a friendly tone. After what you and some others did, you have no right to address me in such a familiarity voice. If you must address me, it will be either Uzumaki-sama or Uzumakis-sama. Now let's begin the match. Both of his opponents flinched at his statement, but got into fighting stances nonetheless, indicating that they were ready. 8th match, Naruto Uzumaki vs Kiba Inuzuka. Begin. Kiba took out a soldier pill and tossed it to Akamaru, who swallowed it, and his fur started turning red. Giji Ninpo, Shichaka no Jutsu, Kiba yelled as he started to gain more canine attributes which were essential for using his clan's taijutsu. Flashing through hand seals, he got down on all fours as a chakra aura started to show. When he finished them, he was now surrounded by chakra-like flames as he called out his next jutsu. Akamaru then disappeared in a poof of smoke, only to be replaced with an exact twin of Kiba. He was also in the same all-fours position as the original. This trick again. Come on, this is going to be boring, although I don't want to push my luck since I am only wearing standard gear here and not my customized gear. That does remind me, I need to check in with Gunsmith and see if my order is completed. I don't like that 5.7 I carried when I first arrived. Though I admit it is a good gun, it just doesn't suit my style, and this Beretta M9 doesn't even compare to what I ordered, Naruto thought as he stared off into the distance with a bored look on him. Upon seeing how bored Naruto was, Kiba exploded. Fuck, what's up with you? Don't ignore me, he shouted as he snapped Naruto out of his daze. Oh, it's just you, Inuzuka-san. Could you please not yell? I'm trying to think here, Naruto dismissed as he was intentionally doing it in order to enrage Kiba. It appeared to be working as both Kibas frowned deeply at the dismissal Naruto gave them. We'll show you not to underestimate us. Jijin Taijutsu Oji, Gutsuga, the original Kiba yelled as both lunged at Naruto whilst transforming into miniature tornadoes that would rip anything that touched them to shreds. Naruto smirked as he took out the pin to the smoke grenade and dropped it on the floor, causing a grey cloud of smoke to fill the arena, blocking everyone's view in the process. Kage box. Why would Naruto do that? I read the reports of his Chunin exam preliminary match, and it said Kiba did the same thing and almost won because of it. What does he gain from giving Kiba the advantage? Tsunade said as the other Kages looked to her in confusion before looking back to fight in the arena. Ha! This what you come up with? Man, you must still be the dead last if you think this will work. I mean, how can you forget what happened at the Chunin exams? I'll still find you, Kiba said as he used his enhanced senses to locate Naruto from within the smoke. With the Konoha 11, why is Naruto making a rookie mistake of allowing Kiba to easily find him when he is relying on sight mostly? Ino asked as the rest of the Konoha 11 minus Shikamaru nodded in agreement. Sighing, Shikamaru decided to re-enlighten them on how Naruto has been fighting so far. This is too troublesome to say, but look back on how Naruto's been fighting his matches presently, he said as the others thought about what he meant. It was Niji who answered him. He has been using deception, Niji said. Nodding towards the Hyuga, Shikamaru continued. Right. So don't assume he is being stupid, because whatever he did it for a purpose, he stated as the others looked back towards the fighting arena. The smoke was clearing and Kiba could clearly see Naruto. But now he was wearing a gas mask and his thermal goggles, not that he knew that. What the fuck's that? Kiba demanded as he heard a muffled chuckle come from Naruto. Well, Kiba, this is known as a gas mask, and what it does is allow me to breathe in a cloud of poison gas, which just so happens to have been the cloud we were in just a moment ago, Naruto informed Kiba in a slightly cheerful voice. But neither Akamaru or I could smell anything in the smoke, Kiba protested, getting a nod along with the transformed Akamaru. In response, Naruto spread his arms out in a kind of I don't give a crap look. Doesn't matter to me. I'm safe with this mask on, and you should be feeling the effects of the poison right about now, Naruto stated. As soon as the words passed his lips, Kiba immediately felt his right arm fall limp and go numb. He couldn't move it no matter how much effort he put into moving the limb. Fuck, he's right, Kiba whispered to his partner, who whined in worry. I can give you the antidote if you surrender and forfeit the match, or you can continue to try and win, and I will keep avoiding you until you drop dead and I win anyway. So which will it be? Naruto asked, trying to keep any humor out of his voice. To many who knew Naruto from Konoha, this was surprising considering they believed that he would never try to kill a comrade. Though many who personally knew Naruto believed that even though it was unlikely, it wouldn't be surprising, especially with what happened before he was thrown out of Konoha. Thinking over his options, Kiba decided to not risk, and raised his hand. I forfeit, he reluctantly said as Akamaru transformed back into his original form. Winner, Naruto Uzumaki, Anko announced, though nobody applauded because although the match was over, the case of Kiba's poisoning was still their main concern. Well, give me the antidote, quickly before the poison kills us, Kiba yelled as Akamaru barked in agreement. Naruto then gave a sheepish grin. There isn't any. What? Kiba shouted, angry that he was tricked and would die for it. Naruto, seeing this, decided to explain before there was a stadium-wide panic. There was no poison either. I used the first rule for ninja, deception. I convinced you that the smoke was poisonous, and that I was safe because of the gas mask, when in reality all it was a large smoke bomb. But what about his arm? Anko asked as she too was curious about how Naruto made Kiba's arm numb. Naruto then pulled out a small syringe with the word morphine written on it. This is known as morphine. It is used for treating battle wounds that are gained in a fight. When someone is wounded, the pain is numbed by injecting this into the opposite limb to where the wound is. It then nullifies the pain receptors around the wound so that the brain doesn't register the wound there. This way men don't shout out in pain and give away their location and don't die from shock, but the downside is that the whole limb is numb to the point of being useless. I injected it into you when you were in a rage in the smoke so that you didn't register it. I found you in the smoke by using my thermal goggles, points to the goggles on his head, to track your heat signature, Naruto finished explaining. Many of the medic nin and doctors were looking on in awe at the medical tool. They could really use that to allow patients relief from the pain they endure when out on missions. Tsunade herself wondered if it would be possible to arrange a trade for them. The other Kages were along similar lines, though more for what Naruto used it for in combat. After all, being able to make an enemy collapse from numbness would help them a great amount. With the Konoha 11, see, told you he had something cooked up. This whole thing has become too troublesome if you asked me, Shikamaru said as he finished his latest smoke. The dope's been lucky, so what? He won't beat me in Uchiha Elite, was the arrogant Uchiha's statement, which caused all the other occupants Shikamaru, Lee and Niji to glare at him. Knowing he was outnumbered, Sasuke scoffed, and went back to scowling at the blonde Uzumaki as Lee made his way down to the arena. What is it you plan on cooking for me, Naruto-kun? Anko cooed as gave Naruto an innocent look that most men were unable to resist, keyword being most. Anko-chan, I'll tell you later, but I think Lee-san would like for the match to start, Naruto said as Lee gave him his signature good guy pose. Yes, I do believe we should begin this youthful match between two youthful fighters. If I can't win, then I will do 200 laps of Konoha. If I can't do that, I will do 400 push-ups, and if I can't do... Shut up. We know already. Everybody shouted towards Lee as everyone knew to cut him off before he and Guy did their most dangerous genjutsu, hugging each other on the beach during a sunset. Lee blushed from embarrassment before he stood in his ideal fighting stance, the Goken. Naruto withdrew his stun knife and once again took up his combat stance. Anko, seeing that both of them were ready, raised her hand. 9th match, Naruto Uzumaki vs Rock Lee. Begin. Lee leaped at Naruto with Medjonin speed and threw a fast right jab that Naruto ducked under. Lee was about to aim a kick but was surprised when he felt Naruto stab his knife into his right calf. He vaguely saw Naruto press a button on the knife until his whole world suffered from pain, and from the same electric shock that Shino had received, but got the full power of it, rather than a diluted version that Shino got due to him being in direct contact with the knife. Soon the pain was too much, and he passed out. Winner, Naruto Uzumaki, Anko said as cheers came from many of the foreign shinobi present and boos from the Konoha residents. And I know the fight with Lee was disappointing, but I couldn't find any names for the techniques he used, so I wanted to wrap his match up quickly. Both Anko and Naruto rolled their eyes at the Konoha residents, and wondered how the negotiations were going to go if Konoha had a mindset like this as a whole. As Lee was carried off and out of the clearing, Niji took his place and got into his Juken without even speaking a word and activated his Byakugan. He knew that Naruto was not in a speaking mood for the Konoha 11, especially those who abused him before he was thrown out of Konoha. His aim so far was to beat Naruto in this fight. Once Naruto was ready as well, Anko decided to start the second to last match. 10th match, Naruto Uzumaki vs Niji Hyuga. Begin. Almost immediately Niji lunged with a Juken strike to Naruto's right shoulder, to which Naruto sidestepped and both began a series of taijutsu blows, blocks, dodges, counterblocks and counterattacks. To the audience it was astounding that Naruto was facing down one of the most effective taijutsu with little to no effort being needed. Niji was getting annoyed as his prized Juken was completely obsolete against the blonde who dodged or deflected all of his attempts to shut down his chakra network. How is he doing this? The Juken is supposed to be one of the most prized taijutsu style, and this man is easily avoiding it, and he isn't even using any jutsu, just that knife and taijutsu. Niji thought as he made one last effort to jerk and strike his stomach only for Naruto curve around his outstretched palm and landed a punch to his head, causing him to stagger slightly. That's another thing, his punches are even more powerful than Lee's. If it wasn't for the fact that Naruto was banished, I would have thought Tsunade taught him her super strength. He mentally added. Naruto meanwhile was waiting for Niji to pull a certain stance that would give him the opportunity to counter and end the match. During all of this he kept one of his hands close to the assortment grenades he had as the fight dragged out. A couple of minutes later Niji was getting agitated, decided to use something from the Chunin exams as he jumped a few yards away before he got into a different stance that all the Hyuga recognized right away. Naruto though mentally grinned as he saw the stance. Now to put my plan into action, he thought as he reached the back of his belt and grabbed something that went unnoticed by everyone else. You are within my range of divination. Hakaiku Nijuhachi Sho, Niji called out as he charged at the blonde Uzumaki, only to see a small device being thrown right into his view. He quickly glanced at Naruto, to see him closing his eyes and covering his ears. Instinctively he did the same, but two things prevented this. Firstly, he forgot to deactivate his Byakugan, and secondly, he didn't cover his ears in time. The result was for him to be blinded by a large flash and to go deaf from a loud bang that rang through his ears. It didn't help that the Byakugan enhanced his vision quality, so he felt the effects more than a normal person would. Falling back from seeing white and being slightly deaf, he wasn't aware of Naruto's fist smashing into his face, sending him skidding a few feet away before he was unconscious. Naruto grinned as he pulled his fist back to his side. What happened there, Naruto-kun? I saw a flash and heard a loud bang, then I see Niji knocked out, Anko asked, cradling her head slightly to steady herself. Well, you see. When Niji charged at me, I threw what is called a flash bang. It temporarily blinds and deafens the enemy to disorientate them. Thanks to this I got an opening, and all it took was a hard punch to put him out, Naruto explained as Anko laughed at the grin he was showing. Fuck, you're good at this shit. Anyway, one more and then we go on our date, Anko said as they saw the last of the Konoha 11 come down. When Sasuke came out onto the field he still had that cocky smirk of his he always wore when he was convinced that he would win. He had his arms folded over his chest as he casually walked into the arena with an air of arrogance surrounding him. Naruto's eyes narrowed at the sight of the man that had caused him to be thrown out of Konoha. Though I think I should thank him for that, as I did find a better place to go to and marry my 2 wives. Naruto thought as he went to stand next to Anko. In his mind he heard Kurama growl at the Uchiha. That waste of space. Kid, do me a favor and humiliate that bastard. I still have a bone to pick with that damn clan. Especially after what Madara did to me both when he was facing that Senju and Namikaze. Kurama angrily said as he saw through Naruto's eyes the Uchiha flare his Sharingan. When the Konoha villagers and ninjas saw the legendary Sharingan they all cheered and praised him. On the outside Sasuke looked like he wasn't paying attention, but Naruto knew that all of the time he had known the Raven Head he always wanted attention and that right now he was mentally grinning. So dope, ready to lose to me again as like all the other times? He mocked as many others laughed at Naruto, thinking that it would make him do something rash and be disqualified. Yet I was the one to bring you back to Konoha, Uchiha-san. Please spare me any unsavory comments, and let's begin, Naruto said as he moved his hand towards his stun knife again. And he was about to grab it when Sasuke decided otherwise. Don't you dare insult me, an Uchiha elite. I bet the Yondaime and his wife didn't even want you, considering they died just to get away from you. They didn't want to live with a demon, so they killed themselves. Ha, ha. Sasuke laughed as many of the Konoha residents laughed as well, whilst the foreigners believed that was uncalled for but didn't say anything. Naruto bowed his head slightly so that his hair obscured his eyes from view, and his right hand that was reaching for his stun knife redirected itself to take out the Beretta M9, and held it in front of him. He then used his left hand to pull the slide back to see that a round was chambered. Releasing the slide, he took the safety off and stood in position. This time though it was different. It was more casual, with his legs being slightly apart, and his hands by his sides. Kage box. Uchiha-san should not have done that, Yujito stated as the other Kages turned towards her. What do you mean? Tsunade asked, as even though she disliked the Uchiha it was still her duty to look after him as well as all her other ninja, both as the Hokage and a medic nin. It's because of the weapon Naruto has now, Drew Fu added as the Kages looked to her now, looking for more information. Seeing that she now had their attention, Fu decided to continue. You see, when he was tortured by people who he trusted a lot and prayed would stand by him in his moment of need, Tsunade winced at that. Something in him broke. Fu drew out at the end. And because of that Naruto developed a mental mode called killer mode. What it means is that he loses all other thoughts and goes into a kind of trance. No love, happiness or kindness. In fact, there isn't even any negative emotions like anger or rage. All there is one thing: kill. At one point Naruto was outnumbered by enemies, and to combat them he entered this mode, and let's just say it made the Uchiha massacre look tame. Yujito finished for Fu as the Kages turned back to look at Naruto more closely. Arena. When Yujito and Fu finished their explanation, Naruto lifted his head to stare right into Sasuke's Sharingan eyes. Sasuke himself was starting to doubt himself when he looked into Naruto's eyes. His half-lidded eyes were dead, looking as if there was no life left in them. His face didn't show any expression, just as blank as a fresh canvas. His hair caused shadows to appear over his eyes, making his posture even more deathly. Inwardly shivering, Sasuke drew his tanto in his right hand and stood in his kenjutsu stance. The two stared at each other, one with a deathly gaze and one with a slightly nervous but arrogant gaze. Seeing that the two ready, Anko started the match. 11th match, Naruto Uzumaki vs Sasuke Uchiha. Begin! As if 1Q, Sasuke weaved through numerous hand seals, whilst Naruto just stood there, not reacting at all to the danger being presented. After Sasuke had finished making hand seals, he brought his left hand to his mouth and took a deep breath. Katan, Gokakyu no Jutsu, he called out as he released a large fireball, twice his height, at the rooted Uzumakis. When the fireball connected, it exploded and scorched the earth around it. Many people started to cheer, thinking that Naruto had been caught in the flames, to which Sasuke forgot about his initial fear, smirked smugly, and turned off his Sharingan. After a few seconds, he didn't hear Anko call him the winner, and the cheers from before had died down. Upon closer inspection, he saw that they were ones of shock and they were intentionally looking behind him. What are they so shocked about? He thought as he rose an eyebrow in confusion and turned around to see what they staring at, only to find himself looking down the barrel of Naruto's M9. Bang! Ah! Sasuke shouted as he dropped his tanto so that he could cover his left eye, which now had a hole in it, and was bleeding profusely. In reality, that would have blown a hole through his skull, but because of his instincts, Sasuke was able to make the bullet go diagonally through his eye and out the side of his head before it hit anything else important. As soon as he fell to the ground, Naruto pressed the M9 against his forehead with that same dead look about him, as if it didn't matter to him that he had just blew a person's eye out. Naruto pulled the hammer back, ready to fire another round directly into his brain, and was in the process of squeezing the trigger but paused when he heard Anko shout out to him. Naruto-kun, stop! You won all right. No need to go any further, Anko yelled as Naruto registered what she said and stopped within seconds of killing the Uchiha. Sasuke opened his only working eye to see Naruto's expression come back to reality, though he still had a cold expression on. Naruto relaxed his grip from pulling the trigger and pulled the hammer back into place, before putting it back into its holster and walking off towards the changing rooms. Asshole, he muttered as he passed the Uchiha without even looking at him as the medic Nin came and tried to heal his eye. He then looked at Anko and gave her a small smile to reassure her that he was fine. I'll pick you up after the negotiations for our date, Anko-chan, he said cheerfully as Anko nodded back with a grin as she decided to finish the tournament. Winner of the tournament, Naruto Uzumaki. Many of the foreigners cheered loudly, including the captains and privates, whilst the Konoha residents kept quiet as they were inwardly fuming that the demon won. The Kages themselves were shocked, though Inoki was more like sweating as he knew what that meant. Uzumakis was now under the UWN's control and not theirs, all because of his stubbornness. As Naruto walked into the changing rooms, he absently thought of what the negotiations would be like. Most likely a pain in the ass, he thought as took off his helmet and started changing. If only he knew how right he was. Meanwhile, so the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki won the bet and is now the owner of Uzumakis. This does throw a dent into our plans, Madara said as he stood in front of the ghetto mazo that contained all of the biju that they had accumulated so far. Why is that, Madara-sama? Sasori said from within his puppet. It is because judging from how big that ship of theirs is, they would need a coastline that allowed deep-sea ships to dock, and Uzushio just happens to be the only place with such a coastline. This will mean that the time it takes for the UWN to send troops across will be shortened, Madara replied. What do you propose we do then? Ku Orochimaru hissed as Madara turned towards him. We shall try a preemptive strike. Have the White Setsu army stage an attack during the negotiations between the UWN and the Shinobi Alliance. Hopefully they will be able to capture the Jinchuriki as well, Madara ordered as Setsu nodded and sunk into the earth until he was gone. Madara then addressed Deidara. I want you to sink their ship that is near Naha port in Kirigakure. Your ability to use clay birds should prove useful against their defenses. On it, Deidara responded as he made a large bird of clay, big enough for him to ride on, and flew out towards baseplate. Sasori, I want you to try and copy those devices the Kyuubi Jinchuriki used in the tournament. They could be very useful for the future. Orochimaru, organize our troops to be ready for when the reinforcements from the United Whirlpool Army arrive. We must be prepared for anything, Madara finished as he used Chukuken Ito to teleport himself to another location. As the others went away to do what they had been ordered to do, Orochimaru continued to scheme again at the prospect of getting the Sharingan. Soon I will have Sasuke-kun and my ticket to immortality. What if Mito Uzumaki give her inheritance to Naruto? And thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoyed this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel. And leave a like if you guys need the next part. Comment down, and thanks for watching the video, and see you guys in the next video.